This is case number 2018 CA 5321, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital versus, Jack Kowalski, et cetera, et al. Versus Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. Let's take appearances starting with the plaintiffs, please.
Greg Anderson, Nick Whitney on behalf of the plaintiffs. I'm sorry, Matt.
Maybe Miss Lawrence should be the one introducing everybody.
Howard Hunter, Pat Crowell's, Ethan Shapiro, and David Hughes, on behalf of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital.
Just for everyone's planning purposes, I have meetings at lunch today, Friday, Monday. So each of those 3 days that I know of right now will have to end right before noon. Okay.
Your Honor,
We're talking about exhibits, right?
yes, but before we do exhibits, the defense would like to move for reconsideration of the court's ruling yesterday allotting 4 additional hours to each side. The basis of the motion is the prejudice that's going to result in the defense. And to lay this out, the defense has respected what this court's admonition has been for the weeks leading up to trial, that each side was going to have 55 hours that would include direct, cross, and rebuttal. The court made it very clear to both parties, in fairness to this court, that that was also going to include a division of jury questions. And to the great credit of this court gave the shot clock every single day to both sides about where we were so there would be no surprises. The defense, in reliance on that, did their best. We did our best to give expedited cross-examinations, including a relatively brief cross-examination of Dr. Duncan, who had 4 reports with underlying assessments, a relatively briefer cross-examination of the economist who had multiple reports, a relatively brief cross-examination of Dr. Bifolco, who had 2 different reports and also had categories for each relating to different illnesses that I intentionally expedited to save ourselves time on direct for the witnesses we needed. We cut down our cross-examination of Dr. Chopra, including not going deep into his credentials, even though he misrepresented his connections to Harvard. We shortened our cross-examination of Dr. Kirkpatrick, and even when our case began, we cut down several designations of Bonnie Rice in order to make sure we had enough time. The plaintiff was well aware of the shot clock, and instead of resting when the court was looking at them to rest, they continued to call witnesses that we believe to be extraneous to their case, including multiple people from the church, Facebook friends with no real relation to this case, and at the end of their case before resting, a relative of the Kowalskis who testified through a Polish language translator. They made their strategic decisions on the order, and only after they rested did they ask for additional time. While we appreciate that the court allotted additional time to both sides, the prejudice to the defense is we cannot go back and recreate cross. The net effect of this is that plaintiff has 4 additional hours to cross-examine witnesses that the defense doesn't have. And due to that prejudice, we would ask the court to reconsider its ruling and go back to the 55 hours per side. Thank you, Your Honor.
The court's going to deny the reconsideration. Certainly, the court has been, and you can sit down now, the court has been very cognizant of the time issues. To the credit of this jury has been extremely active in asking questions, which of course has generated additional questions from both sides. I think it's appropriate at this time. I hear what you're saying. If you wish to call Dr. Duncan and some of these other folks to ask them additional questions, you are free to do it, because you also got an additional 4 hours defense. So, I don't see it as any sort of prejudice. I think it's appropriate given the length of time of those jury questions, and that's my decision. What's next?
And Your Honor, just briefly, because I do need to protect the record on this.
You've already spent 5 minutes talking on this issue, and the whole point coming early was to talk about exhibits.
I'll merely note that we have to move for mistrial as at the time decisions are rendered, so the defense moves for a mistrial on that basis.
You're moving for a mistrial. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. You're moving for a mistrial when you got additional time and you can call the same witnesses to address whatever issues. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Your Honor, because we
Can
don't.
I-
Okay.
Can we go to exhibits, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Judge, we really want to get some medical records into evidence. We have not received any specific additional objections. We just gave the court our there's no new exhibits listed. They're the ones we've been trying to get. So we would like to start with 3032,
3032.
Lurie Children's Hospital records.
And what's the objection?
Before this, Judge, you may recall, just one moment, on the motion for curative or
Can we
otherwise.
stick with exhibits? Like I said yesterday, I need to trim our sales. We need to stay on topic. Exhibits.
I understand, Judge. This is designed to do exactly what you told us to do Tuesday morning. You ask us, because of the difficulty of all of these individual piecemealing objections to hearsay within hearsay and experts that are not experts, we put together a curative instruction, and it's not even really that. It's a 301.5 evidence admitted for limited purpose, and the purpose was we don't have to get into that. They can move these things in wholesale as long as there's an instruction so that the jury does not take a doctor or a nurse who may have random comments in the record and attribute to them as though they were experts on the topic. And I don't know if the court had a chance to review it or not. I have a copy of it here.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Judge,
May I approach?
Judge, they filed this late last night. We haven't filed a written response, but they want some overall arching curative instruction as opposed to doing what the court asked them to do, which was to identify which pages and sections of this record they object to.
So this was filed last night. I honestly don't think I've seen this. This hasn't been docketed yet.
Yeah. 2 seconds.
I wouldn't give that. No.
Yeah. Okay. So, Judge, we've received no specific. We need to move the Lurie Children's Hospital record then.
What's the objection?
Hearsay contains unqualified expert opinion, quasi-expert opinion. I think, and hearsay, mostly hearsay within hearsay.
Is there-
Those comments may contain therein that are not for medical treatment.
The other day, you said that you had a list of documents that you were concerned about. Is there something specific, or is it just this generalized statement?
Judge, I think we were hoping to have some form of generalized objection based on that, or a curative instruction that would limit our only concerns, and then we wouldn't have to go through all of these. It was impossible over the course of the evening to go through every single one of them. We understand the court's position on this, and we'll accept the court's ruling wherever it is.
The court's going to let in the medical records from Lurie's, which is 3032. Is that pages 1 through 249? Is that the complete?
It is, my understanding it's the complete record, Your Honor, 3032.
Okay. What's next?
3047 Tampa General Hospital 7/30/15 admission.
And that's 1 through 1,148.
That's correct.
Anything specific about this, or just your generalized statement that you just made with respect to Lurie's?
In particular, the comments of Bonnie Rice contained within where she was, we can go through it, but we need 24 hours. If it could be admitted with the proviso that we'd be able to come back, and we understand that we over our objection of hearsay within hearsay and unqualified expert opinion, or opinion appearing to be expert, then what we could do is come back, because there are a number of, quote, opinions by Bonnie Rice, who's not a medical doctor, and they're not to a reasonable medical probability, nor could they.
I delayed from Tuesday when this issue was addressed to give you time, so I'm not going to further delay. So court will go ahead and receive 3047, the entirety, which apparently is 1 through 1,448.
Thank you. Going back to the first page, Judge. 3023, Arnold Hospital admission.
And is this the complete set?
That's my understanding.
Mr. Whitney, are you taking this one?
Yes, Your Honor. We do have specific objections within this record for hearsay within the record and 403. I can point the court to the pages. The first is at 3023, 0003. If you can put it up, if you want.
He just need to turn it on. The screens are off.
Let me cycle it again, but it's over to his feed.
Yeah, here, it's on. Thank you. 3032.
3023 and then
23.
page
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
3023, page 3.
Thank you.
If you could highlight the history of present illness and pull that out so it's larger, please. Your Honor, within this entry here, about 3/4 of the way down, the line begins, the pediatric intensive care unit because part of her home pain regimen consists of ketamine infusion. Our objection to this record is that this theme is throughout the Arnold Palmer records. This mistake, this inaccuracy. There was never a home pain regimen consisting of ketamine infusions. So with respect to this sentence, we would just redact home. It's true that her pain regimen consisted of ketamine infusions, but other than the resident and Arnold Palmer that got this wrong, there's no evidence in the record that these ketamine infusions ever occurred at the Kowalski home. So it would be highly prejudicial to allow these records in and allow them to carry this theme forward.
We have evidence in the notes, the personal notes that Mr. Kowalski authenticated on the stand where Mrs. Kowalski wrote she was giving IV ketamine at home through the report. We intend to admit that record. We have the doctor that will come and testify either by video or live to these notes. We also have evidence in Dr. Hanna's records that he had Mrs. Kowalski sign a contract to not put ketamine IV through the port. So these are absolutely, this is not a one-off. This is part of a theme that is part of the defense's theme. They were certainly welcome to call this witness across.
Who is going to testify that there was actually ketamine infusions at home? Who is going to testify?
Dr. Brandon Alexander.
Okay.
And who?
Dr. Brandon Alexander is the resident I'm referring to, that Arnold Palmer, who had this one interaction and put this down in his record. He has no basis.
As a general statement, the question of ketamine infusion at home has been something that's been percolating for years, and every single time I try to get actual direct testimony, it always seems to be a hearsay basis for the. So unless and until there's actually someone that comes and testifies, I am thinking I've got a 403 issue because.
Well, Judge, we can then hold this back for now, this exhibit, and after the testimonies come in, revisit.
But unless I get somebody who's going to come in and says this,
Okay, we understand,
the
Judge.
reference to home ketamine infusions is not coming in.
We will not ask that this particular exhibit be admitted at this time.
What's next?
We would like to put in 3001 and maybe we should start with 3002 since they're related. 3002, the consent for.
I thought the consent was already in.
No, Judge, I don't believe 3002 is in. The hospital records are in, but they wouldn't agree to this page of the hospital record.
Right.
This was marked separately.
This is just Mr. Kowalski's signature. I mean, what is,
This is the consent that they signed when they came into the hospital, Judge. It's part of the hospital records. Plaintiffs would not agree to be part of the joint exhibit of the hospital records.
well, I have no problem, and the consent's going to come in, but where's the first page that I normally would see, and why isn't this all together?
Well,
If we're talking about the consent, it's the paragraph that talks about diagnostic treatment.
There's the rest of the judge.
Yeah, there it is. It's on
4 pages.
it's on page 2, Judge. This is 4 pages.
Okay, so the first page is the signature page?
Can you go back to 1?
It's in reverse order, Judge, so it starts
Oh.
out, and then it goes all the way down.
Oh.
Number 1 is the signature, what would be the last page. Sorry for butting in.
Okay, so 3002 is the full record?
No, it goes to 4. But yes, it's the full record. There's 4 pages.
Can I see 3 and 4, please?
It's because, and the reason it's backwards, Judge, is because the hospital, that's how they do the hospital records. They come in.
So clerk, you're telling me 3002, page 2 is in.
Correct.
So what's the objection to pages 1, 3, and 4?
This has to do with the release and the stretching of something that has absolutely nothing to do with our issues, which are the photographs and the 48 hours separation.
This is Mr. Kowalski's signature on
It is
an
correct.
admission document.
I believe so.
Yeah, this is relevant, it's coming in. So the court will receive the totality of 3002.
Your Honor, please note we would like at some point argument on the terms of this agreement, because those would be within the purview of the court as the construction of the contract and its applicability to these circumstances, given the fact that they're not medical
Johnson.
records.
And I think I've said, if you're asking for an instruction as to the contract, that seems like a jury instruction, and your side can ask for a special jury instruction on it.
I understand this.
3001.
And what is this?
It's the notice of privacy practice referenced in the 10-7-16 consent.
And
It's 4 pages.
can I see pages 2 through 4? Haven't we already seen this? It hasn't. I feel like this is already.
I don't know, Judge. They all look alike at this point. I don't recall this going in.
Is there any? I mean, anything from the plaintiffs on this one?
Well, Your Honor, we would just reserve on having an additional instruction here. The purpose of this, from the defense's point of view, is they believe this gives them carte blanche to bring in Sally Smith outside of any investigation, and so that's how they're going to try to use this. So we'll try to craft an instruction.
Was this document given to your client?
The signature on the page would indicate it was on the previous exhibit.
It's relevant. It's coming in. Court receives 3001, which I understand is just pages 1 through 4.
3027 Elmhurst Memorial Hospital records.
What were the dates of admission or service?
2013 to 2014.
And this is before the Kowalskis moved to Florida?
Yes.
So our objection would be relevance.
And this is before the CRPS,
Diagnosis.
well, definitely before the diagnosis, but before the first instance of CRPS?
More than a year before, year and a half before.
What is this for?
1 second here.
Sure.
Your Honor, these are related to the asthma and prednisone that's been referenced throughout this trial.
Well, there's really no dispute over prednisone. I mean, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital administered prednisone, prescribed prednisone, so it really doesn't bear any issue in this case.
Judge, it has to do with her medical history, including her asthma, which has been an issue in the case.
Well, do these records say she did not have asthma?
No, that's my knowledge.
So we're putting in documents to further confirm the asthma that no one's disputing?
Judge, we'll pass on this one for now. We'll come back. 3028. This is a record from Dr. Hannah, dated 10/5/2016.
I'm having trouble reading it.
Oh, okay. He's a nutritionist consult that he has referred her for 2 days before our admission.
It says nutrition consult needed due to patient being
Malnourished.
malnourished. Is that the word?
Yes, sir. It's affirmative.
Low
And
body
so
weight.
this was
iron
2 days
deficiency.
before the admission
Yes, sir.
plan.
403, they did not know about this. It wasn't a basis for any of their opinion. It's hearsay, and until such time as Dr. Hannah, who they have recently subpoenaed, and I guess we're planning to call Monday, testifies as to the context of this, it gives the jury a complete misrepresentation. For the record, the record shows that Maya Kowalski was in Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital on October 1st. Because she was again dehydrated based on the fact she was having a relapse and she had the stomach issues, which the diagnosis is part of CRPS. And then this is the day before, 2 days before she comes back to Johns Hopkins. This, taken out of context, they purports to show that she was somehow being abused because she wasn't being given enough nutrition. That is a completely, obviously from the record the court has seen, false premise given the testimony of her and everyone else. So, as to 403, we object as to hearsay, but more importantly, 403 out of context until such time as Dr. Hannah, who they just subpoenaed to appear Monday, can talk about this.
Sure. Do I need to say anything, Judge?
No.
Thank you.
Court's receiving it. What's next?
3031, Dr. Mendez's records.
Give me a time frame that we're talking about.
He's testifying, Your Honor, November 2015.
October through December of 2015.
Oh, thank you. October to December of 2015, and Dr. Mendez will be testifying.
So this is around the time of Maya Kowalski's trip to Mexico.
That's correct, Your Honor.
And there has been testimony about the Lee Memorial
Yeah, that's believed so.
plaintiffs.
This alone is the only page.
Apparently it's 39 pages.
This is Dr. Mendez.
Right. No objection to the document other than a, quote, diagnosis, or it wasn't even that. Dr. Mendez is the one who met very briefly with the Kowalskis and then came up with the Munchausen as a possibility. That's not, and so we moved to exclude any, quote, opinion by Dr. Menendez contained within there. But the document itself, we don't have a problem with. We are just moving to exclude and redact anything having to do with a, quote, diagnosis. He had completely no qualifications whatsoever to make that.
That would seem like you can cross-examine him on.
Well, the problem is if it's taken out of context, Your Honor, then it would be, I think, a 403 issue. And so until such time as there was sufficient record, predicate in the record for the court to determine whether or not the jury should be seeing random comments by physicians who may or may not have liked Beata Kowalski and may or may not have any possible qualifications to throw these things out.
Let me ask the defense this.
Yes,
I have been excluding Chapter 39 matters
Yes.
at the defense's request. Why does this not go to a Chapter 39 issue? Because we're not this. What does this go to? What cause of action does this go or defend against?
Mr. Shapiro is going to respond, if that's all right, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. This goes to confirm he is an independent treating provider that noticed irregularities between the relationship between the mother and suspecting whether this was actually CRPS or some other underlying psychological factors. That's been a very important theme for the defense, to be able to say that all children saw inconsistencies and irregularities in their record. So did other providers as well. It doesn't go to Chapter 39. It goes to exactly to confirm that a lot of what all children saw was also the same. And there's an allegation in this case for medical malpractice, mistreatment, and the plaintiff saying, you know, you got this diagnosis wrong in the record, you mistreated her in the record. So this is a prior physician that made a very similar or same observation and diagnosis. So we go to that.
But assume for the sake of argument it goes to medical malpractice. How does that help the jury as to what Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital should have done or did do with respect to treating Maya Kowalski?
Well, if the court is going to exclude the plaintiff from alleging that the diagnosis of Munchausen by proxy is medical malpractice, then perhaps this doesn't come in. But if the court is going to allow the plaintiff to insinuate or argue, as I believe they've argued repeatedly, that this diagnosis of Munchausen that was on the Morris transfer is so far out of left field and you came up with this and this was wrong, you have no support for this. We have another physician who a year earlier made a very similar or same observation/diagnosis. So it goes to that exact issue. Now, if the court is going to say, I'm not going to allow this jury to consider any of the diagnoses made at All Children's as part of a medical malpractice claim, then we could possibly reconsider this. But at this point, the jury's heard this. They've heard that the Kowalskis were floored by this. This came out of left field. And here we have a doctor, an independent physician, making the same observations and diagnosis. So it goes directly and as a defense to the claims that the Kowalskis have raised in their case in chief.
Is this document for purposes of today?
Pardon me?
Let me testify on mine.
I think I'm going to need to think about this more. I mean, obviously there's been discussion of Munchausen and by proxy as well, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around the concept of, sure, the All Children's was aware of that as a possibility, but how does that talk to us about what All Children's Hospital should have done or did do as far as its treatment of Maya Kowalski? I mean, because from a 30,000-foot view, can a medical provider say, oh, well, look, in this record from somebody else a year or two ago has this thing, therefore I don't have to do, I don't have to provide treatment for the patient in front of me that I've got my hands on right then and there.
That's not the argument, Your Honor. The standard of care defined under Florida law is what a reasonable health care provider would do under same or similar circumstances. So the plaintiff has introduced to this jury that part of the big defense to the reason for not consenting to the transfer is this diagnosis code that came out of nowhere. Part of the defense of that is for us to be able to tell the jury that this diagnosis that they say was the impediment was out of left field. They're saying it's out of left field. It's not part of the standard of care. For us to be able to tell the jury what would a same or similar reasonably prudent healthcare provider do, we absolutely need to be able to say same or similar healthcare physicians now in Naples, in Tampa General, at Lurie Children's made the same observations.
I feel you're misconstruing what I've heard. Maybe I misheard. I heard the plaintiffs say that they did not want to sign documents that had that diagnosis on it, and they felt that there might have even been criminal liability if they were to sign a document. So they're basically making a declaration against their own interest, which is different than what you just argued.
Right, but
So did I misunderstand the plaintiff's position?
Respectfully, I think they have said that, but they've also said to this jury that that diagnosis was incorrect. They're implying to this jury that that diagnosis came out of left field, that it wasn't made in good faith. And Dr. Neuberger specifically said in his testimony that that was an incorrect diagnosis to the prejudice of the family. This goes directly to observations. It's our entire theme of the case, that there were other providers at the time raising these red flags and making diagnoses and observations that were exactly similar to this one.
I think I need more time on it, and I think we need to
Right.
perhaps a memo on this one.
Okay, and I'll just one other thing while Your Honor is considering it. This also goes to the issue with Dr. Wassenauer. This diagnosis, suspicion of Munchausen by proxy, went back to Dr. Wassenauer as a letter to him raising this, and part of the direct and cross-examination of Dr. Wassenauer was, did you see this in the record? What did you do to intervene on this point? What did you advise the Kowalskis? It also goes to their awareness as a potential in the record of somebody else telling the Kowalskis, we suspect there's a psychological factor. Perhaps you don't need to go to Mexico. Perhaps this is not a course of treatment that is being recommended. So it's an incredibly important note to the defense for a number of different reasons.
What's next?
Okay, so, Judge, it's not on the list, but I'd like to revisit the exhibit, and we can put it up, 31980001. The court sustained the hearsay objection to this document. It has to do with Charlotte LaPorte being the one on the call. So my response to the hearsay is that this is a document that the witness was essentially accused of not being truthful about this and making it up. This is a prior consistent statement consistent with the testimony offered to rebut an express or implied charge against a declarative improper influence, motive, or recent fabrication. She specifically states in the third paragraph, yesterday when you were on the phone, I had to redirect you. And that is a prior consistent statement, therefore it's not hearsay.
Your Honor, I think the previous discussion is being misrepresented. I think if you zoom out again, you see at the bottom of the page, this is the exhibit that continued with Beata Kowalski's email, if I'm not mistaken, if we go to page 2.
Well, that's correct, Judge, but
And that was the problem, is that we pointed out that this continued and there was previous exchanges that were relevant.
And this is the one where I basically said it's all coming in, or
Exactly. And they withdrew it. There was no...
well, okay. I think that was a different one we withdrew, Judge. But
well, it was a different number, but it was the complete email exchange.
But Judge, the purpose of putting this in is not to put in all of the conversation. It's to put in the prior consistent statement. The rest of the email we'll delete. All about, everything else. It's about yesterday when you were on the phone, I had to redirect you as a prior consistent statement due to, and we believe we have the right to put it in, it's not hearsay, because of all the attacks on Ms. LaPorte, whether or not she was the voice on the phone.
I'm going to stick with our discussion, the comments I had. 2 days ago or whenever it was.
One other comment, Judge, please, briefly. If you do consider it hearsay, it's not being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, but that she was present. And I believe that that is an acceptable exception. We're proving that she was present on the call.
That's true. That's fact.
I will put the whole,
Yeah.
I will put the whole thing in, Judge, if that's the issue.
We object. At this point, she's gone. We can't cross-examine the shot report on this report on this email.
And she was released.
And it's a prior inconsistent statement. If they will take the position that this proves she was on that phone call, she says here, I did not give my authorization to record a phone call. She did not object at the time, so it suggests it wasn't her.
Judge,
It's hearsay any way you look at it.
I don't remember.
Judge,
what
we'll
the
bring
other
her
number-
back if that's the issue. If they want to cross-examine her.
So what's next?
I'm sorry, did you just say it?
I didn't rule. I said I thought you were gonna try to put the whole one in, and I wasn't. I don't remember the number, so until I can look at it. Because remember, there was like 4 pages of this email.
All right, we'll revisit it tomorrow, Judge. Okay. Moving on. We would like to put in 3033. These are dental records, Judge. The relevance is that these are procedures that Maya Kowalski went through subsequent, well, before and subsequent, I guess.
So the dates are from 2015 to when?
Well, definitely into 2016, Judge. I'd have to, can you go to the next page? 2017, next page, please. 2018. 20.
So is there's nothing before 2015, is that correct?
That's correct.
Objection relevance.
Overruled. Court will receive 3033, and it's pages 1 through 20. Is that the complete series?
That's my understanding.
I'm asking the clerk, because
Oh,
I want to make sure when I admit the whole document that there's not 85 pages and,
oh no, that's,
thank you. What's next?
same 3034, page, 15 pages, similar.
What dates are we talking about?
I believe these are all after. Can you go to the next page, please? 2020, 22.
Anything besides relevance?
Yeah, nothing besides relevance. There's no
Okay,
dispute
court.
that she went to the dentist.
Hearsay.
Court's going to overrule the objection on 3034 for relevance and admit it.
3035, Nemours Children's Hospital Records.
Now, what dates are we talking about? Is this for an actual admission, or is this the attempted admission? Or is it both?
1 second here. We'll skip this one for now, Judge, and we'll come back.
What's next?
3037.
This is the ENT.
They're 2016 records.
Besides relevance, is there anything?
Oral 3, hearsay.
Well, how is this a 403 issue?
Because it's an ENT, and there's no issues here regarding ear, nose, and throat. It's not, this is not for asthma, this is not for immunology, and it's darn sure not for the CRPS.
Well, it's during a CRPS episode, so it is relevant. I disagree on 403.
And I'm wondering,
It's
what
14
we
pages,
wonder
Judge.
with a lot of these, Judge, is the actual doctors at Johns Hopkins didn't have these documents, and many of these at the time of admission and what was going on there. So how, if it's coming in to show their state of mind for treatment, how are things that they never knew at that time relevant?
You can always point out the absence of these from the Johns Hopkins if you feel that that's something that you need to argue to the jury, but this is a provider who saw Maya Kowalski during the CRPS issue, and so it's relevant. I don't see how there's a 403 issue, so unless you can point to me for some specific passage in here, it's coming in.
There really isn't much to it, is there, Judge?
Well, there's 14 pages, Counsel, just so you know.
Is there diagnoses?
Judge.
Can we scan the pages?
Yeah, I would like to just see what. Okay. Is that it? Next. 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 Benny? Is that it? Two more. Next. Next.
That's it.
It's hard to see at this point the relevance of Maya Kowalski and having this exam and procedure.
Okay, court's overruling the relevance. Court receives 3037, looks like it's pages 1 through 14.
3038.
What are the dates of these?
I believe 2015, 26, looks like 2016, can't read that actually. 15, yeah, October 2015 to November 2016.
Whose records are these? I'm sorry.
Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition of Florida. Let me go to the next page. She's in there for abdominal pain, constipation, RSD.
Next page.
Next page, please.
Next.
Next page.
Next page.
No objection to that one.
Yeah, so it talks about ketamine coma. You're okay now?
Of course.
Okay.
Things like this, we've been spending a lot of time on the question of relevance of medical records of providers concurrent to the specific time frame. I'm just pointing it out that we spent a lot of time on that.
Submitted, Your Honor?
The court receives 3038, pages 1 through 9.
All right, Your Honor, do you want to wait on the rest, given the time, or what's your preference?
Let's do the one that's 11 pages, 3039, and then
Okay.
that'll probably be it. Next page. And next page. Next. What date is this? 2015. Okay, next. 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 Where's the date?
It seemed to be duplicative, Your Honor. I mean, I think we just saw this note in the previous record. That's not sure why it's coming in twice.
It's a different facility, right?
That's,
I think it's the exact same procedure and the exact same page we saw before about she was brought in the operating room in place.
I don't know if this was in the other, a lot of these doctors' records have records from other doctors because they've been forwarded to them. I don't know if this specific one was in the previous one, Judge.
I think it's fine. Question, is it in the Johns Hopkins records? I don't know. We'll see. Court receives 3039, pages 1 through 11.
All right.
Okay. Anything else before we bring in this jury?
Just a matter of scheduling, Your Honor. Did I understand we're staying until 6 tomorrow night?
We're going to keep going through exhibits. Yeah.
Okay.
We're trimming our sails, and our days are going to get longer.
We have two issues, but I think they can wait until the next break.
And I highly encourage, since I'm telling you our days are going to get longer, that you all need to be better at communicating and not fighting every single issue. But if you want to, we will stay longer and longer. If we need to start coming in on Saturdays and Sundays, we're going to do that too. We're going to finish this case. Let's bring in the jury.
Who's coming first? Michelle Smith.
morning. Please be seated. Were you able to enjoy that lovely weather yesterday? I'm glad. A little too cold for the beach, huh? Okay. I want to confirm while you were away, you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves, you did no investigation, and you received no information about this case. Is that correct? And that you have not been approached by anyone about this case. Is that correct? And you've not seen any media accounts of this case. Is that correct? Mr. Hunter.
Police court, defense calls Dr. Michelle Smith.
One quick question.
Madam Clerk, if you can swear in Dr. Michelle Smith.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
All right, Doctor.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you tell us your name, please, ma'am?
Michelle Smith.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a critical care physician at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. No, can't hear.
And it's, we got a mic problem.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't usually speak very loud. I will do better.
Okay, there you go. You said you were employed at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital.
Yes.
And what is your job at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital?
I'm a critical care physician.
Okay. Now, the jury has heard a lot about Dr. Sally Smith, your Dr. Michelle Smith.
Correct.
What's the difference?
I'm a critical care physician, so I'm trained to provide care to children in an intensive care unit. And Dr. Sally Smith is a general pediatrician who also specializes in child abuse.
Okay. Now, would you give the jury the benefit of your background and training, please?
So I went to medical school at Georgetown University. I then did my general pediatric training at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. I then went and did a pediatric critical care fellowship at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore.
Okay. And are you board certified?
I am board certified.
Okay. How long have you been at All Children's Hospital? And I'm going to ask you to break down its different iterations at All Children's and then Johns Hopkins All Children's.
Okay, so when I first started, it was All Children's Hospital, and I started in 2002. And I have been there since 2002 and went through the transition with the acquisition with Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore.
Okay. And what is your primary role at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital today?
I'm a critical care physician.
Okay. Have you had occasion to contribute to the literature in your profession from time to time?
I have done mostly quality projects. I have presented at a conference most recently in Portugal on simulation use in the ICU for cardiac arrest.
Okay. And do you work purely in the so-called PICU?
I work both in the pediatric intensive care unit and in the cardiovascular intensive care unit.
Okay. Did there come a point in time at which you became involved in the care of Maya Kowalski?
Yes.
And when was that?
I believe the date was October 9th. It was a Monday. I took over the care on a Monday.
Okay. And if that were to be October 10th,
Okay, it's the 10th. Okay.
would that comport with your recollection?
I believe so, yes. If
Okay.
that was Monday.
I'm going to ask our faithful tech folks to put up. Did you bring your notes with you this
I
morning?
did not bring my notes with me.
You did not?
I did not.
Would you put up 1001-78?
Is it in evidence?
This is in evidence, Your Honor. It's part of the All Children's Hospital record. And I'll ask you to put, that's not the page I was looking for. Go to the next page. There we go. Okay. Let me ask you to take a quick look at what's on the screen before you and tell us whether this is the note of your taking over the care of Maya Kowalski on Monday morning, October 10th, 2016.
I don't see anything.
Is that your note?
I don't see anything.
Oh. No.
Your screen's not plugged in. Probably the power again. Yeah, let me try. See if it works. Hey, I need a mic.
Oops.
Maybe that's sign of life.
There we go.
It's up. It's working now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our assistant IT.
Man of many talents.
Yeah. Now, 1 second. And Mike, if you're listening, you don't need to come right now.
Oh, thank you, sir. So you came in that Monday morning, October 10th. Tell us a little bit about what your routine is when you take over a patient's care on a Monday morning like this.
Okay, so it's not unusual for us to start a service on a Monday. And so typically we would contact the physician who is on service prior to us, and we get sign out on all of our patients. So that usually would occur on a Sunday. So I spoke with Dr. Teppa on Sunday, and she would review all the patients that would be on my team the following day and review, the current plan of action and prepare me for taking over on Monday.
Okay. And was it your understanding this patient had been admitted over the weekend?
Correct.
And you were taking over from Dr. Beatrice Sanchez?
Yes.
Okay. So when you took over, when you came in and saw the patient on Monday morning, what did you do? What did your routine consist of, and what did you do to assess this patient?
So our typical day starts with another handoff. So the person who's on call that evening in the hospital, the physician, provides a handoff to us. And so we meet and, again, get a handoff on all the patients in the ICU, what occurred overnight, so that then I have all the information from my handoff from Dr. Teppa. So what she may have not included in that handoff that she was unaware of. And then we would move from that to another huddle where we have a multidisciplinary huddle that involves our charge nurse, our respiratory therapist, both medical team physicians, residents, sometimes the social worker. And we kind of get a feel for what the ICU is like that day. It's kind of obtaining a shared mental model so that we know what patients in the unit are sick, who's going out of the unit, who will be discharged, what type of admissions we'll be getting. And it really just kind of brings us all together so that we're all aware of all of what's going on in the unit. It's a large ICU, and so it's important for all of us to know all of the, goings in and out of the unit.
Okay. In this particular case, what did you learn about Ms. Kowalski that morning?
Objection. Hearsay.
I'm gonna sustain that.
Did you take a history regarding Maya Kowalski that morning?
We would, my first interaction with her would have been on rounds, and so after we finish our huddle, then we start rounding and we go through all of the patients on our team. And during that, the nurse would also give us another update of any issues that came up overnight, and then we would present all of the current data, including vital signs, laboratory studies, or anything that would be available for us to review. And at that point in time, we would interact with the family. Now, and let me just clarify with referring to my note.
Is there a particular part of your note you need to refer to, Doctor?
I was just looking to see whether or not where I discuss our discussions with the family.
Okay. Well, let me direct your attention to the paragraph at the bottom of the page you're looking at. I think it's 79. And it says social. Could I ask our support here to bring that paragraph up? And it continues over to the next page so you can see, you can refresh your recollection with what's there.
I remember that. So I did meet with the father. One of the pieces that was signed out to me by Dr. Teppa was the family's interest in potentially being transferred to Nemours Children's Hospital. And they had reached out to their ICU physicians over at Nemours about a transfer. And so I spoke to Father and I told him that I would reach out to them. And I did speak to an ICU physician at Nemours who had reviewed the information that they had been provided over the weekend. They had discussed it with their pain team. And at that point in time, they did not feel like she was a candidate to be transferred to their hospital. That Dr. Santana, who is their pain specialist, felt that this would...
Objection. Hearsay.
It's not offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, Your Honor. It's offered to prove what she was told.
Sustain.
What did you learn, if anything, from Dr. Santana about what they wanted to do or not do at the time?
Objection. Hearsay.
Sustain.
Your Honor, may we approach counsel?
Sustain.
Had Dr. Teppa Sanchez attempted to begin the process of transferring this patient to Nemours the previous day, to your understanding?
Correct.
And on the morning of October 10th, did you attempt to continue the process of arranging transfer?
It probably would have been in the afternoon after we concluded rounds, but yes.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with the father beyond what you have told us about regarding transferring the patient to Nemours at that time?
In regards to transfer, my conversation would have been relaying what I learned
Objection.
when I
Hearsay.
spoke.
With Mr. Kowalski?
Is it with Mr. Kowalski?
That's what I thought until it got interrupted.
Is it?
I thought the question was to Mr. Kowalski.
It was.
If it is,
You can continue, Mr. Hunter.
I was told that the family wanted to be was interested in transfer to Nemours, so I spoke with Nemours, and then I went to Mr. Kowalski, who was present in the room, and I spoke to him about the potential of transfer, and that at this point in time she was not a candidate for transfer.
Okay. Did you have any conversations with Mrs. Kowalski, the mother?
The father had requested that I call Mrs. Kowalski, and I did call her and left her a message, but I did not speak to her that day.
Okay. On that Monday, what did the treatment plan for Maya Kowalski consist of?
So the treatment plan was brought together with our pain team. They were helping coordinate the care of the management of her pain infusions. And so if you could just please go back to the neurologic section. So Dr. Elliott was the pain team physician that was on that day. And so every day we met with him and we coordinated our care together and developed our plan, and then we discussed it with the family. And so that day we had discussed with the father the weaning plan for the ketamine and the dexmedetomidine infusions that she was on.
Okay. And did you conduct an examination of Maya Kowalski that day?
Yes.
And what were the results?
Everything, she that day did not really want to be examined, and so I was able to get some exam, but she, because of her discomfort, did not want a complete exam, so it was a limited exam, and it's documented in my note.
Let's go back for a moment to the transfer issue. What did you tell Mr. Kowalski about why the transfer was not being approved by Nemours at the time?
So as I documented in my note, Dr. Santana wanted to have her on an outpatient basis. Her treatment plan is an outpatient treatment plan, and that they really wanted us to wean her off of the medications. And then
Objection, motion strike. That's not on the record.
Excuse me, I think it is.
Sustained.
Instruction to the jury, please, Your Honor.
You'll disregard the comment as to what the doctor in Orlando allegedly said.
Well, let's continue. Can you recall any other interactions that you had with the Kowalskis on Monday, October 10th?
no,
Okay. And then did you also take care of Maya Kowalski on that Tuesday, October 11th?
yes,
Okay. And when did you arrive at the hospital that morning?
we typically arrive at 7:30 in the morning.
Okay. And did you conduct rounds that morning in much the same way you've described before?
Our day would be the same.
Okay. Did you have occasion on that Tuesday, October 11th, to speak with Mrs. Kowalski?
Yes.
Okay. And what did your conversation with Mrs. Kowalski consist of?
Mrs. Kowalski was concerned that the information was not appropriately provided to Nemours, and that there was potentially, facts of Maya's history that were not provided. And so she really wanted to arrange a conversation with them so that she could tell Maya's story.
Okay. And were there some particular therapies that Mrs. Kowalski expressed to you that she wanted to obtain at Nemours?
Yes, she wanted an intrathecal infusion pump.
Okay. And what was after you had this discussion with Ms. Kowalski about her concerns, what did you do?
I then reached out to Nemours and spoke with the physicians there and organized a meeting with Dr. Santana and the ICU physician. I'm not sure what their name was.
Okay. And do you have a note of that date, October
Yes.
11th?
Yes.
And that would be, I believe, starting on page 100176. That's in evidence, Your Honor, as per the All Children's Hospital record. And I would direct attention to the last paragraph on that page that begins with, I contacted Nemours. And did you, in fact, contact Nemours and arrange for a telephone conference?
Yes.
And who was a party to that telephone conversation?
It was Dr. Santana and Dr. Torres. We also had Mrs. Kowalski present and the bedside nurse. We met in the the ICU physician office.
Okay. Now, before we go into those details about the conversation, tell the jury what an intrathecal pain pump is.
So an intrathecal pain pump is a pump that is inserted underneath the skin, and there's a catheter that goes into the space around the spinal cord. And it can infuse various medications, usually pain medications, to help treat and manage chronic pain.
To your knowledge, was that something that was recommended at All Children's?
No.
Why?
From the literature on CRPS,
Objection?
Sustained.
Don't talk about the literature.
Okay.
Just tell what your experience is.
the only time that I have ever had patients with intrathecal pain pumps are usually patients in compassionate care, usually with significant pain from cancer.
Are there risks to a pain pump of this nature?
There are definitely risks to having a pain pump.
Tell us, if you would, what you learned from the discussion that took place, that you arranged with Nemours.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, I'll try again. That was probably a bad question. Was there a conversation, a telephone conference that occurred involving Mrs. Kowalski, yourself, and some folks from Nemours Children's Hospital?
Yes.
And who was on the phone to your knowledge?
Dr. Santana, Dr. Torres, and then also present in the room with me was the bedside nurse.
And what was Mrs. Kowalski told during that conversation?
Mrs. Kowalski told her story, and then Dr. Santana told her that she has a lot of experience with CRPS. She trained in Boston, and that was where she had learned her management and was reproducing that down in the Orlando area in her own clinic, and that she had very good success with treating patients with this diagnosis using physical therapy, occupational therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy.
Was there an indication that this outpatient program would be available?
Yes, yes.
And did you have a discussion subsequently with Mrs. Kowalski about that program and about transferring her child to Nemours for this outpatient program?
I did. I actually was very encouraged after speaking with Dr. Santana and thought that she was very well educated, very well experienced, and had good success. So I was actually really optimistic and excited that we would be able to make the connection for the Kowalski family to get care there.
Did you have an impression regarding whether Mrs. Kowalski would agree to such an outpatient transfer?
Initially, yes, I thought that she would be interested in it. She expressed that she was interested in pursuing it.
Okay. Now, your note that we have up here, which we're going to publish to the jury when we finish this, your note seems to make reference to continuing into the next day. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, where are you referring?
Well, let me just ask this. When you left the hospital on October 11th, did you have any impression regarding whether or not this outpatient transfer would be workable?
Soon after our conversation with the physicians at Nemours and my understanding that we were going to hope to get her there as an outpatient, the mom told me that she really wasn't interested in wanting an intrathecal pump and wanted to explore other places to have this, and I believe it was Cleveland Clinic that she thought that they could potentially be transferred to get an intrathecal pump.
Okay. And did you attempt to arrange that, or did you attempt to contact Cleveland?
I did not. I told her that we needed to have somebody to reach out to and put that kind of on her to let us know who to reach out to.
Okay. And then was the last day that you cared for Maya Kowalski on October the 12th?
Wednesday, yes.
Okay. And did you have any further conversations with Mrs. Kowalski that day?
I did have conversations with her. We again, every morning we met with the pain team and we discussed what our plan for the day would be and how we would wean, progress with our weaning. And so we reviewed that with her, and she agreed with our weaning plan. We also, at that point in time, the GI team had looked at Maya. They had also looked at the CT scan that had been done over the weekend, and they felt that because of this abdominal pain that she had presented with, that it was worth doing an endoscopy. They had reviewed her records and did not feel she had ever had any endoscopy performed, and so this was discussed with Mom, and she agreed with having that, which was scheduled for Friday. She'd require a Go Lightly clean out in preparation to have the endoscopy on Friday.
And during this 3-day period that you were taking care of Maya Kowalski, was the pain team also involved in her care?
Every single day.
And what was the weaning plan, if you can describe that briefly? We'll hear from Dr. Elliott about that, but what was your perspective on it?
It was, in reference to the ketamine, it was a gradual wean in the ketamine where we were going down like 1 milligram per kilo a day. I think maybe towards the end it was a little bit faster. And then with the dexmedetomidine infusion, that's given to an IV. Clonidine is an oral medication that acts very similarly, and so we had transitioned her to a clonidine patch. And when we put the patch on, often we'll give some oral doses of clonidine because it takes the patch a little bit of time to absorb and get to steady state drug levels in the body. So we'll use oral doses of the medication to help get to that level in the body where she's actually getting the full effects.
Okay. And over this period of 3 days and this weaning process, hence you used a drug term that I can't pronounce, and I'd like to get you to explain. Dexamethasone?
Oh, dexmedetomidine, Precedex.
Okay. And what is that?
It is alpha agonist, and so we use it often in the ICU as a sedative and also an analgesic. It is actually a really nice medication because it has less respiratory depression, and so we can provide sedation to patients that aren't on any respiratory support and not have as much concern that they would stop breathing.
And during this 3-day period that you took care of Maya Kowalski, did it appear to you that the weaning process was going smoothly?
It seemed to be going smoothly. We weren't having discussions about stopping the wean every day. We were progressing with our wean. I wasn't called frequently to the room, that there were breakthrough episodes of pain that weren't being controlled. So it seemed like we were being successful in weaning her off.
Okay. And did it appear that she was generally comfortable during this process?
I think intermittently she probably had complaints of pain, but we were, I think, well controlled.
And did you ever have any contact with the Kowalskis after you went off duty, so to speak, on October 12th,
No.
2016?
No.
Okay. Come on, John. Did you ever hear from the Kowalskis during the time that you were taking care of them that they wanted to leave the hospital against medical advice?
No.
Did you ever have a conversation about that with Mrs. Kowalski?
No.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, ma'am. Your witness.
Thank you.
So you're aware then that the Kowalskis were told not 2 days prior that if they left, security would come and escort them back into the hospital and call the police. You were aware of that, right?
No.
Nobody ever told you that?
I was told on Monday morning, that they wanted to go out of the hospital, and there was conversations in regards to leaving against medical advice.
AMA, right?
Correct.
And is it, to your knowledge, AMA a force of law? I mean, do doctors through AMA, are they able to retain people and hold people in their rooms just because they disagree with the diagnosis?
Sustained.
Hey,
Ma'am, Mr. Edgerton, sustained.
I'm going to change. So was the reason AMA,
I'm sorry, can you clarify that?
against medical advice?
Against medical advice is AMA.
And doesn't that mean that you disagreed with the treatment that the non-Johns Hopkins doctors had for Maya?
Objection, Your Honor. No foundation in the testimony.
I think you need to identify the doctors to which you refer.
Hannah, Kirkpatrick, Chopra, Wassenauer, Barr, Spiegel.
Can you rephrase the question, please? The
Yes.
beginning of it, not the names, but if you could please rephrase the beginning of the question.
Against medical advice talks about your medical advice. The Kowalskis disagreeing with your medical advice.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And to that point, they had been counseled by multiple experts in CRPS, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had no CRPS program at the hospital, did you?
Correct.
So, you said that when you spoke to Beata, she was cooperative and knowledgeable, right?
Yes.
And you explained your plan about weaning off and the dosages, and she was agreeable, right?
Correct.
And throughout the entire conversation, she was polite and, although expressed her opinion, was acting fairly normally for a parent of a sick child. True?
She was polite to me. She did ask for therapies that were unusual for families to ask for, but she was always polite to me.
So, isn't the reason that, not necessarily you, but the hospital were keeping them there, was that there was a belief that somehow Beata was a harm to her child?
Objection to the characterization.
Isn't that true?
Overruled.
So I think that there were red flags in her history.
I'm not talking about that, ma'am. I'm just asking you a simple question. Was the reason that you were keeping her there because you and other doctors feared what Beata Kowalski would do?
I don't
Is that
think-
true?
That is not true.
So they could have left at any time without any problem. And Johns Hopkins would have let them just walk. Sorry. They could have left at any time with no problem. Is that right?
We have a process for against medical advice, and so we would have followed that process.
And what would that entail?
So when a family asks to leave against medical advice, we contact the nursing supervisor and we contact social work. We go and we talk to the family. We explain to them why we feel like it is not in the child's best interest to be discharged. And in this case, she was still on significant doses of sedation. And we would have that conversation. If we couldn't come to an agreement with the family, then if we felt that it was an unsafe situation, then we would contact the Department of Child and Family Services. But at no point in time would we restrain the family or force them to stay.
So it would be against your policy, for instance, to tell the Kowalskis that if they did try to leave, security would be called to keep them there.
If a child is under DCF custody, then I'm just explaining the policy.
Go ahead, please.
If the patient is under a shelter, then we would call security, but we would not intervene. We would, if the family was leaving, we would call the Department of Child and Family Services.
But from October 7th, 2016 to October 13th, 2016, there was no DCF hold,
Correct.
was there?
Correct.
And so, to your knowledge, did anybody ever go to the Kowalskis and say, remember when we told you that if you tried to walk off, we were going to have the guys from security come here and force you to stay?
I never said that to the family.
Okay.
Overruled.
And your reason, medically, was she needed to be weaned off of ketamine. Is that right?
She was on several medications that we were weaning her off of, yes.
Well, wasn't the primary one you were worried about the ketamine?
We were worried about the ketamine, but she also was on dexmedetomidine, which was also a different medication than she had been on before. We had not resolved the concerns of abdominal pain, and at that point in time, she was not eating and drinking enough to sustain her hydration level and was requiring IV fluids. And so we would not typically discharge a patient that we were uncertain of their ability to maintain their hydration status. And so typically we would discontinue our therapies and make sure that the patient was in a state where they would be able to maintain themselves without needing all these things that were being done in the hospital.
Anything else? Was it or was it not the ketamine that was one of your primary concerns?
I think that there was a concern of the ketamine as an outpatient, and that's why other people were involved, but my concern was what I was being faced with at that moment in time when I was taking care of Maya.
So now, how much experience do you have with ketamine infusion?
I have a lot of experience with ketamine infusions.
Okay. Are you an anesthesiologist?
I am not an anesthesiologist.
Psychopharmacologist?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Psychopharmacologist?
No,
Psychologist?
no.
Did you prescribe for Maya during this time, by the way, an antipsychotic? Haloperidol?
Haloperidol?
Yeah.
Haloperidol is an antipsychotic, and it was a recommendation that was provided by the pain team with mom in agreement.
So you wanted to take her off the ketamine and put her on an antipsychotic. Is that right?
It was as a PRN as needed to help transition her off of the infusions.
All right. And your belief about the weaning of the ketamine was you thought, I don't know if it's just you, but you thought that ketamine had physical withdrawal symptoms. Is that right?
When you review ketamine, it's uncertain, but we do know that it does have psychological withdrawal. And so patients who are abruptly taken off of ketamine, who have been exposed to it over time, can have a psychological withdrawal, like other psychedelic medications.
Uh-huh. Psychedelic medications, right. Okay, so now, during this time, in reviewing your records, I don't see a single note, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is not a single note about any physiological signs of withdrawal by Maya Kowalski. True?
Again, usually you do not see physiological withdrawal with ketamine, and she was still on the infusions, and so usually you will see withdrawal once you have removed the medications from the patient.
Mm-hmm. Well, she was eventually removed, right?
She was off of the ketamine on Wednesday, which was my last day taking care of her.
Do you know how many times she had been on and off ketamine in the preceding year?
I know that she was receiving ketamine infusions on a regular basis, yes.
And did you go back before testifying here and review any of the records going back the past year?
Not in regards to how often she was getting ketamine, but I knew that she was getting it on a regular basis.
Was it true that they had been seeking, the Kowalskis had been seeking advice and treatment from Johns Hopkins going back to even before the July 4th onset of the CRPS?
I know from reviewing the medical records that are in our electronic medical record that she had been seen at our hospital, yes.
And through that period of time, after Dr. Kirkpatrick's diagnosis in September of 2015, Johns Hopkins records uniformly stated CRPS as a primary diagnosis.
Objection.
Up until this point, anyway. True?
What's the legal basis of the
Objection.
objection?
Foundation. Argumentative.
Overruled.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. After Dr. Kirkpatrick first identified this as CRPS, September 23rd of 2016, in every visit after that, up to this point, Johns Hopkins physicians had identified this CRPS as the primary diagnosis for Maya Kowalski. True?
The mother provided that as a diagnosis, and so when we take a history, we ask families about their past medical history. And when a family member tells you that their child has something, we believe them. We don't, on every diagnosis, go back and re-diagnose it.
Well,
There's a trust within a relationship that you develop with a family and a physician.
I thought my question was simply that, was that the primary diagnosis over that period of time? Is that true or false?
It was one of her diagnoses.
Well, if the jury were to look at these records, would they not find out that CRPS was the number one diagnosis by each and every doctor over that period of time?
I don't know how everybody writes their list of diagnoses.
And so you went back through the records, so certainly you must have seen that she'd been to Dr. Kirkpatrick, and then Dr. Wassenauer was her treating, ongoing, I guess you all call it, attending pediatrician,
It's a primary care provider.
primary care provider, and then she'd been to Dr. Hanna. Right? What in-depth conversations did you have with any of them about the need for the ketamine to treat CRPS?
I did not have any conversations with them.
I'd like to talk for a moment about intrathecal pump. By the way, is that FDA approved, intrathecal pump?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And isn't it true that Beata Kowalski learned about intrathecal pumps in a CRPS chat room as a possible alternative? Didn't she tell you that?
I don't believe she told me that.
Did she?
Overall.
Did she tell you that she was looking for ways to reduce the amount of medications in Maya?
She did not say that specifically.
Isn't it true that an intrathecal pump, one of the main advantages of it is that it reduces the amount of medication in the child's system?
It can.
Well, isn't it just the idea here putting a tiny amount into the spinal cord as opposed to having it run through the whole body?
Again, I'm not an expert in intrathecal pain pumps. I'm not a chronic pain chronic pain physician. I'm a critical care physician. But the hope is that it would provide better control of the pain at lower doses. Correct.
Okay. And you'd had parents with children in extreme pain ask you about that previously, had you?
No.
But you weren't a pain management specialist, right?
No, I'm a critical care physician.
All right. And so I want to talk for a moment about Nemours, if we could. Did you ever get a chance to look at the form that the Kowalskis were asked to sign in order to transfer Maya to Nemours?
No.
Is it true that Beata Kowalski wanted an inpatient CRPS program?
I was just told that she was interested in Nemours. The difference between inpatient and outpatient, I don't know the specifics of what she was.
It turns out that Nemours, after you talked to him, you found out that Nemours did not have an inpatient CRPS program. It was outpatient, true?
Correct.
But they did have an inpatient pediatric psychiatric program, didn't they?
I do not know.
Do you know whether the codes on the release authorization the Kowalskis were asked to sign were coded for psychiatric problems such as Munchausen by proxy?
No, I don't know.
If they had signed on to that, wouldn't they have been agreeing that, A, their daughter had psychiatric problems?
Objection, Your Honor. Call for legal conclusion.
Sustained.
If they had signed on to that and it said psychological psychiatric problems, do you think that would have posed problems?
Same objection,
I'm-
Your Honor. It's all speculation.
Overruled on that.
I'm not aware of the form that you're speaking to, and so I don't feel like I can answer the question appropriately without understanding the form that you're referring to.
Do you know whether a nurse who agrees that she was involved with abuse of her own child, Munchausen by proxy, would be able to stay in that profession?
Objection, Your Honor, that's cause for speculation.
If you don't know, if she doesn't know.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
I've never been involved in a case of Munchausen by proxy. I've never met any families like that, so I can't speculate on how they would feel or how a nurse would feel.
But a pediatrician wouldn't be able to continue to practice if there was a record of child abuse, would they?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
So, again, what steps, strike it. You had also said on intrathecal pumps that you mostly knew of them for children with cancer, pain from cancer, right?
Correct.
Do you know any of the pain scales, such as the McGill pain scale?
I'm familiar with pain scales that we use in the hospital, and off the top of my head, I don't remember the name of the pain scale.
What is the disease or disorder that ranks above cancer and at the top of the McGill pain scale?
I don't know.
Is it CRPS? If you know.
I'm not sure. I've not seen a listing of diseases based on a pain scale.
I know you're not. I understand, but you understand you did understand that CRPS was one of the most painful conditions known to medicine. Did you not?
Yes.
And again, did Johns Hopkins have an inpatient CRPS pain treatment program?
We do not have an inpatient CRPS pain program.
Mm-hmm. So, again, if there was no hold and Beata Kowalski to you was acting like any other concerned mother, why not just let him go?
She never asked me to leave. That was never brought up to me.
But had it been brought up to you, you would have said, fine, go ahead, walk out of here.
I would have had a conversation with them that I did not think that she was ready for discharge.
Okay?
And because there was a current DCF involvement, we would contact them to let them know. But if I felt that she was safe to be discharged, I would have discharged her.
If you felt she was safe,
Correct.
you as a doctor felt she was safe.
As the person that's currently in charge of her medical care, yes.
Well, at this point, you had absolutely no indications that Maya was, strike it. At this point, you had not done an extensive review of Maya's records, had you?
I had reviewed what was in our...
Back then, did you review? At this point, as of October 10th.
Answer the question.
Dr. Teppa had done a very thorough review in her H&P, and I had read her H&P, which summarized all of the encounters that she had had when she was at All Children's Hospital.
I simply asked whether you had.
And I told you what I reviewed.
Okay. And is it true that while you were weaning Maya off of ketamine, you also were giving her or putting her back on certain narcotics?
There were medications that the pain team was using and had recommended with discussions with the family to use as an as-needed basis.
What is butorphanol?
Butorphanol.
Butorphanol. Sorry about the pronunciations, but what is butorphanol a narcotic medication?
It is a opiate agonist and antagonist, I believe.
And from your admittedly a brief review, did it come to your attention that narcotics had never worked for Maya previously?
I wasn't aware of it, but all of our plan with pain management was discussed with the family, and so there would have been an opportunity for them to tell us that they did not work. But they agreed with what our plan was.
And who all else was on the pain team? You testified to on direct examination that there was a team that were making these decisions. Who all was on that team, if you could name them for us?
The individual that I interacted with at that time was Dr. Elliott.
Okay.
And then there is a nurse practitioner that is usually rounding with them during the day, and I do not remember who that was back then.
Just Dr. Elliott?
And his nurse practitioner, but I'm not sure who that would have been back then. But Dr. Elliott would be the physician who was rounding those 3 days in the ICU.
So the team was 3 people.
There are several pain team doctors at the hospital. Back then, I believe the pain team was Dr. Elliott, Dr. Dolan, Dr. Patel, and I think I'm totally blanking on the other person's name. I apologize.
But in this meeting...
But usually one of them is on service at a time, and they're the one who is rounding and seeing the patient on that day. So they all the physicians would not come on every single day. They'd be the person who was taking care of the pain team.
Anything else you'd like to add? Just on that day, the people we're talking about that you testified to on direct, were there just 3 people?
I told you it was Dr. Elliott and his nurse practitioner, then I don't remember her name.
I understand.
So
And you?
there's 2. I'm not sure where the
1, 2, 3. You, the nurse practitioner, and
I'm
Dr.
not on the
Elliott.
pain team. I'm the critical care physician.
I'm getting argumentative with the witness.
Sustained.
Well, who was the leader of the team?
As the critical care physician for a patient that's in the ICU, we are the one that directs their care and coordinates with all of the consultants. The person who was on the pain team that day was Dr. Elliott, and he would have been the leader of the pain team rounding on Maya that day.
In that little team you had put together, who was the leader of the team? Who made the ultimate decisions?
The ultimate decisions are made as a team. So as the team leader, the critical care physician coordinates that care, but I do depend and rely on my experts. And so when it comes to pain management in a chronic pain patient, Dr. Elliott, who is our pain team doctor that day, would have led that care.
So he would have made the decisions.
He would make the pain care decisions.
All right. Now, are you in any, or at this point, at that point back then, were you in any executive position at the hospital?
At that point in time, I was the chair of the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee.
I'm sorry, chair of?
Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee?
Okay. So based on everything you saw about Beata Kowalski, there was no need. I'm just talking about what you saw.
Mm-hmm.
There was no need to consider keeping Maya there.
Object, Your Honor, calls for conclusion.
Overruled.
Like I explained to you, she was cooperative with our plan of care. She did ask for things that I did not feel were indicated, and we would have a discussion about that.
You've had multiple parents, maybe every day, ask you for different treatments for their children that you may not agree with. Is that true?
Correct, yes.
That in and of itself would not be a basis to take her away from her little girl, would it?
Objection, Your Honor. Sergeant Mander.
Sustained.
Would that be enough to keep them there?
Can I see the attorneys, please?
members of the jury, please disregard the last question that was asked. Anything else, Mr. Anderson?
No, Your Honor, based on that.
Any redirect?
Very briefly, Your Honor.
You were asked, Doctor, if all children had a CRPS program at the time of this in 2016. They did not, correct?
Correct.
And was the reason you were attempting to facilitate transfer to Nemours was because they did?
It was both because the family had requested to transfer to the Moors, and they have a program that could actually take care of Maya and her CRPS, yes.
No further questions.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Members of the jury, do any of you have any questions? Members of the jury, you could go back to your room. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not do the investigation and receive them from your
All rise. Jury exit.
jury is out of our presence. Dr. Smith, if I could have you wait outside as we go over these questions outside your presence. Okay, Dr. Michelle Smith is outside of our presence. The first question, at the time you saw Maya, you just testified there, quote, red flag, end quote, did, quote, you, end quote, call the child abuse hotline to report your, quote, red flags, end quote, or did the hospital just reach out to Sally Smith off the record first to come in and give guidance on the case first as an expert? Here's the page.
This one's fraught with.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, we have to change that's got.
Howard, can you speak up for me?
I'm sorry, I'm terrible.
I don't have my headphones on.
Oh, okay. Judge, we object, that's got more landmines in it than the Normandy beaches.
As much as I hate to agree with counsel, I think it would be difficult to read that question.
Court sustains the objection, will not ask that question. Read page number 2. As the treating physician in the PICU, what diagnosis were you treating Maya for? We have seen her admitting and discharge diagnosis on her discharge paperwork as conversion or factitious disorder, or question mark. Can you tell us what your diagnosis was as the treating physician? If you meet as a team to hear about the weekend to take over, would the physician you are taking over for tell you they considered leaving AMA?
I can't object. I think those are fair questions.
Okay, court will ask them. Read page number 3. When signing discharge papers, does that admit the patient to agreeing with the diagnosis, or does it only acknowledge receiving the discharge information? Next question. Do the same answers apply with transfer orders?
I just don't like the conclusion.
I think, the problem is it is stepping across the line into legal.
I just need whether someone's objecting or not.
We check it out.
To the first one,
Yes.
and your position, I guess it would be with both of them. Do you object or not object? Okay. You object as well?
Yeah,
I agree. I sustain the objection that those won't be asked. Next question, red number 4. How much IV hydration was Maya receiving at the time in the PICU? Was she taking any oral intake? When Maya stopped ketamine in your hospital, did Maya show any withdrawal symptoms in your hospital?
Okay, Jeff.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
No objection.
Okay, red page number 5. Dr. Smith, you referred to ketamine as being like a psychotropic medication. This, to my knowledge and remembrance of testimony heard in these proceedings, is the first time the words ketamine and psychotropic drug have been used in the same sentence. Is ketamine in a medical prescription description listed as a psychotropic drug, or is ketamine listed as a drug and only the or possible temporary side effects could be brain fog or hallucinations?
Medical prescription description.
I don't have any objection. She said psychic. I think she made reference to psychedelic. I'm not sure she said psychotropic, but
She can correct me. That's a good question.
it's not very strong.
Yeah.
Objection. Okay.
Did I bump?
Yep.
Sorry. Let's take it back.
Well, we don't want the juries to be in the camera.
I'm gonna. I'll object to number 1, but not 2.
Overruled. I'll ask it. Okay. Anything else, or can we bring in the jury?
Nothing.
Let me ask you this: since they're on a break and we're going an hour now, do you want to just take a 5-minute, and then as soon as this witness is over, call the next witness?
I can do that, I guess.
Whatever the judge would like.
Well, I'm just trying to think from an efficiency standpoint, so we don't have to take a break in 10, 15. Let's take 5 minutes, and then we'll bring the jury in. Let the jury know we'll be back in everybody. Any issues we need to address before we bring the jury back in?
No, on the plan, Your Honor.
Let's bring in the jury, please. A moment, okay. Sounds like it's going to be a moment. Can someone get Dr. Michelle Smith, please? Okay, please be seated. Members of the jury, I want to confirm while you're away, you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves. You did no investigation and received no information. Is that all correct? Correct. And while you were on break, did anyone approach you about this case? Did anyone review any media accounts of this case while on break? And members of the jury, I have reviewed the questions outside the presence of Dr. Michelle Smith with the attorneys. I'm going to be able to ask some, but not all of them. Dr. Smith, as the treating physician in the PICU, what diagnosis were you treating Maya for?
So we were treating her for an acute pain exacerbation, and we, at that point in time, had the CRPS diagnosis, but this was an acute pain exacerbation that we were treating and managing with the pain team. We also were evaluating her for the abdominal pain that she came in, and so the GI service was also evaluating her at the same time.
We have seen her, meaning Maya Kowalski's, admitting and discharge diagnosis on her discharge paperwork as conversion or factitious disorder. Can you tell us what your diagnosis was as the treating physician?
I took care of Maya for the 3 days, and that was my only time with her. And at that point in time, we were treating her for an acute pain exacerbation and abdominal pain with the diagnosis of CRPS.
Next question. If you meet as a team to hear about the weekend to take over care, would the physician you are taking over for tell you that they, meaning the Kowalskis, are considering leaving AMA?
Yes, that would have been discussed with me during any handoff.
Next question. How much IV hydration was Maya receiving at the time in the PICU?
The exact amount I'm not certain, but what we would normally do is put them on normal maintenance fluids that would be the requirement for a person who's not eating or drinking anything at that time.
Was Maya taking any oral intake in the PICU?
I think she was drinking a little bit and not eating much solids.
When Maya stopped ketamine in your hospital, did Maya show any withdrawal symptoms in your hospital?
We discontinued the ketamine on Wednesday, and that was my last day taking care of her, so I would have only been involved with her for several hours while she was off the ketamine.
Next question. You referred to ketamine as being like a psychotropic medication. This, to my knowledge and remembrance of testimony heard in these proceedings, is the first time the word ketamine and psychotropic drug have been used in the same sentence. Is ketamine in a medical diagnosis description listed as a psychotropic drug, or is ketamine listed as a drug? and only the or possible temporary side effects could be brain fog or hallucinations.
Ketamine is a dissociative agent, and so that is what we typically talk about it as, a dissociative agent, and it's used for anesthesia. When I use it, it's used for sedation. I'm not sure if that exactly addressed that question.
I'm sure if there's further follow-ups, they will ask.
Please.
Defense, do you have any further follow-up?
Just a couple, Your Honor, I think. I might. First of all, to be clear, Dr. Smith, you were taking care of this patient in the time frames we just talked about, October 10th through 12th of 2016.
Yes, Monday through Wednesday.
And the only transfer effort made at that time was to Nemours, correct?
Correct.
And that transfer was based on the diagnosis you folks had at the time?
Correct.
Okay. Did you have an understanding, or did you have an understanding as to why the family did not wish to have the transfer done at that time?
Nemours wouldn't accept her in transfer. So the plan with Nemours was that she would be enrolled in their outpatient program.
Okay. Did you ever have an understanding as to why, if they did, the family did not wish to transfer to the outpatient program?
Mom wanted to go somewhere where she could get an intrathecal pump, and Dr. Santana had explained that that was not part of their program.
Objection, hearsay.
Gonna let it stay.
You were asked some questions about the extent to which Maya was getting IV fluid.
Yes.
On the unit. I'm going to ask that 1001-73 and 74, that's an evidence, Judge, as part of the joint exhibit.
If it's in, you can put it up.
I'd ask that it be put up, and there's a section there on the second page of that note entitled Fluids, Electrolytes, and Nutrition. Would that indicate, well, first of all, were you folks tracking Maya's intake and output?
Yes, every patient that is in the intensive care unit, everything that goes in them, whether it be through their mouth or through an IV, gets recorded, and anything that goes out also gets recorded.
Okay. And was the patient at the time, at the end of your tenure here, had the patient been placed on something called TPN?
Yes, the mother had asked for her to be put on TPN. TPN is IV formulation of nutrition that includes the basic requirements for nutrition. My initial conversations with Mom was that typically we do not use TPN in patients when we can use their GI tract. So if you can tolerate enteral feedings, that's the most natural way to be fed. Mom raised concerns that the placing of a nasogastric tube to give her the feedings would be distressful for Maya, and she requested TPN. We also don't usually start TPN for short-term nutrition, and so we would not be providing it at the time of discharge. Mom had instructed me that she would be able to find somebody that would be able to prescribe the TPN as an outpatient. Once we had GI involved and we knew that she was not going to be eating for probably several more days, we did start her on some TPN,
Okay.
but not with the plan of discharging her on the TPN.
Right. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Plaintiff,
No questions.
members of the jury, anything further? And may Dr. Michelle Smith be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Defense, call your next witness, please.
We'd like to call Dr. Beatrice Sanchez.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Absolutely.
I swear, yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you tell us your name, please, ma'am?
Beatrice Sanchez.
Okay. Dr. Tepa Sanchez, where are you from?
I'm from Venezuela.
Okay. What is your job today?
I'm a critical care physician at All Children's.
Okay. And how long have you been at All Children's Hospital?
Probably close to 8 years. I started in 2016.
Okay. Would you tell the jury how you received or where you received your education and training?
Sure. I went to medical school in Venezuela, and then right after medical school, I did all my requirements, testing, and everything to be able to come to the United States to do my residency. So I got married, left the country because of the situation of Venezuela, and came to Texas where I did my pediatric residency at Driscoll Children's Hospital. That was for 3 years, and then I was accepted at Emory University in Atlanta for my critical care fellowship. After that, I was able to find my dream job. Also, my husband's a physician, so that's at St. Petersburg, All Children's, and that was my first job as an attending.
Okay. And you've been, you said, with All Children since 2016?
16, yes.
Okay. And are you board certified?
Yes, I am.
Would you tell the jury what you're board certified in?
I am board certified in pediatrics and also in pediatric critical care medicine.
Okay. I keep trying to remember to ask this question, and I haven't done it, so I'm going to ask you. What does board certification mean? What do you have to do to be board certified?
So basically, you have to study a lot and present the exam. So the boards, the pediatric, American Academy of Pediatrics, have boards for general pediatricians. And then they also have boards, the American Board of Pediatrics also has boards, which is just a big, big test. That goes, it's like 4 hours or sometimes even more, through all the general requirements that a person that is trained on that profession should be able to, pass those testings.
Okay. And you've maintained your board certifications?
Yeah, and it also includes not just the test for that. You have to do maintenance of certification. So basically, throughout those years, you have to accumulate points with going to conferences, taking extra trainings, like 2 or 3 days seminars and things like that. And each of those have specific points. So you have to reach a certain amount of points to be board certified.
Now, have you brought your notes from your care of Maya Kowalski with you today?
Yes, I have them in front of me.
I need to know that so I know what to what you've got there.
I have my H&P, which is my history and physical on the day of admission, on the 7th. I have my progress note from the 8th and my progress note from the 9th.
Okay. So let's start by your telling the jury, if you would, when it was that you were involved with Maya Kowalski's care.
So my involvement with her care was basically on the day of admission to the ICU. That is on the 7th, that during the afternoon. So I understand she came to the ER first and was there for several hours as, the evaluations were being done, but then she actually arrived to our ICU that afternoon. I believe it was somewhere probably around 4 p.m. or so. It's kind of my recollection, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. And did you just happen to be the pediatric ICU intensivist on duty that day?
Yeah, there's usually 2 of us during the day and 1 at night. So during the day, the call about presenting the patient was given to Dr. Farhan Malik because he was the admitting doctor that was taking care of all those admissions that were coming. And then he would be the person that would assign either to his team or to my team, and based on number of patients and acuity. And at that moment, it came to my team.
Okay. And had you ever met or heard of the Kowalskis before?
No,
Okay. Had you ever had any contact with them?
no.
Okay. And so just for purposes of clarification, when we refer to the pediatric ICU, that's frequently referred to as the PICU, right?
Yes, the
Okay.
PICU.
So I'll try to remember
Easier.
that. Okay. So tell us what happened when you first encountered the Kowalskis.
So, as usual, my usual practice is in the unit, they'll let us know when the patient arrives. Of course, it's an ICU, so the first thing we do is actually go to the patient to make sure that to make sure that the patient's stable and doesn't need anything right and then. At that moment, I recall the nurses were, as our usual practice, putting like the stickers for the monitors, checking the IV. That's our usual practice, getting another weight on our patient and things like that. But it was very chaotic at the time. There was, the nurses were trying to put their stickers and put it on the monitors, and there was just a lot of very loud environment and a lot of screaming. So my initial encounter was to just try to calm everything and try to take what I was seeing and see if I needed to do something right and then, or if the patient needed anything. I needed vital signs. I needed to make sure I could examine her. So there was a lot of screaming from Maya, and then there was a lot of kind of loud discussions between mom and the nurses.
Okay. And what was the source of all the hubbub, if I can use that?
Sure. I think at that moment, as the nurses were trying to put the monitors in Maya, the concern was that she was in pain, and that everything that was being done was causing pain. So Maya was saying that she was hurting and there was a lot of pain, that she needed her anesthesia medications. I remember her saying those words. And then mom also saying, "You're hurting her. You don't know how to treat these patients. You need to listen to me," and it was kind of like a, discussion between them.
So were you able to take a history of what was going on here?
I eventually was. At the beginning, I think, my interaction was more, okay, let's calm down. We really need to get her vital signs. I wanna, Maya was clearly suffering. So I wanted to make sure I had at least the minimal information I needed so I could choose the right interventions for her.
Okay. And what interventions did you choose? What did you do?
So at that moment, after at least we had some basic vital signs, I recall that we did give her a benzodiazepine to try to just kind of get the anxiety and the nervousness and stress kind of calm down, so we can at least do a physical exam and have more effective communication between the family and me.
Okay. What's a benzodiazepine?
It's a medication that's a sedative. Mostly it doesn't really take care of pain. Depending on the dose, you can do it more for like anxiolysis, may take the anxiety down, but if you do enough of it, you can make somebody just kind of go to sleep.
Okay. What diagnostic studies, if any, did you consider conducting at that time?
So at that time, I knew that the ER had done some basic laboratory studies, blood work. And they had suggested doing some type of imaging studies to the belly, to the abdomen. And at that time, on my limited physical exam, the family's main concern was not only like pain everywhere, but mostly abdominal pain. That's what she was brought to the hospital. So after obtaining just very basic information, I did consider that, kind of discussing how we can get some type of imaging to her belly. My concern was, even though, we have a reported chronic pain diagnosis, that you could still have a pathology that is causing the abdominal pain that might be exacerbating the pain, like, appendicitis or something else. And I didn't want to miss that. I wanted to make sure that while honoring all of her history, that we still also look to see if there is something else going on, which might need different interventions.
So let's make sure we're clear on this. What complaints did you hear Maya voicing at this time?
So she just kept saying it's hurting. She would call out like any other kid to her mother, "Mom, please, I'm hurting." The things that developmentally, kind of stuck to me, and still after all these years, is she was saying things like, "I need my anesthesia medication. I need my medications." She would tell the nurses, "Give me my medicine." She would say, "I need you to push the medicine." I mean, those are things that I have heard between us, in the medical field, and that kind of stuck in my head as a 10-year-old, kind of requesting very specific things. She would say the names of the medications that also kind of stuck in my head a little bit. But, we had the pain team had already been contacted in the ER, and I had also put another call that let them know that she was in the ICU. So I really, they came very promptly. So I really she was suffering. She was clearly suffering. And, while we were getting all our information, I wanted to get her in a place that she was at least a little bit alleviated from that suffering.
Who was the pain, when you say the pain team, who was the pain team that responded?
Sure, yeah. It's anesthesiologist, as you've heard. That day, I'm pretty sure it was Dr. Jenny Dolan, who was the anesthesiologist covering, representing the pain team.
Now, let me go back for just a minute. You've talked about abdominal pain and you're concerned about that. What other sources of pain were you hearing expressed?
Yes. At that moment, Maya, like what I was seeing, Maya saying it was hurting. And it was mostly related to, like I said, the nurses trying to put the stickers on the chest so we can get the telemetry, which is that monitoring, and also evaluate the respiratory rate and things like that. Mom was on and off, kind of like on the bed with her or off, talking to me. And it really struck me that the stimulus to the pain, where she would I was trying to kind of gather what was making her hurt. It deferred to whoever was doing it. So it was the nurse putting the stickers. It was like, "Oh, that hurts so much. Please don't do that." But Mom would hug her and rub her back, but that didn't seem to be hurting. So at the time, I was trying to just gather what was hurting in the kind of chaotic moment, and it just, to me, was hard. Obviously, doing a physical exam with me putting my hands on her, I tried to kind of defer to where she was a little bit more calm to try to see exactly what was hurting. So it wasn't terribly clear what specifically was causing her the most pain.
So did you have the opportunity to gather a history from the patient or from her mother about what brought them to the hospital, what had gone before?
Yeah, I think once, we gave her the benzodiazepine, the pain team came, we started talking about a plan. Things kind of simmered down. She was already on some of the monitors. And then I did, our rooms have the bed for the patient, and then there's a couch where usually the family sits a little bit on the side. So I tried Maya seemed to be a little bit calmer, and I did sit down on the couch and just kind of like my usual technique in any patient is, we work in a high stress environment, so there's not uncommon the families sometimes there's a lot going on. So I let the families kind of just vent out, talk, and that way, they can get out of the way anything that they want to say, and then we can actually have a more effective communication. So at that time, yes, we started going back, let's just go back from the beginning. Tell me, what her admissions have been in the past. Has she ever had surgery? The usual questions. And we went through as much as she told me, and as I was taking notes, all of probably the prior year. Is where most of the focus was on all her ER presentations and admissions.
Okay. Now, when she came to the PICU from the ER, had you had the opportunity to speak with anyone from the ER?
Not personally, no. The call was directly from the ER to the admitting physician in the PICU, which at that day was Dr. Farhan Malik.
I see. And did you have any understanding about whether the patient had already received any kind of pain medication?
Yes, when Dr. Farhan told me this patient.
Sustained.
Did you receive any information regarding whether or not the patient had had pain medication in the ER?
Yes,
Okay. And what was your understanding?
that she had received a ketamine dose, and I believe a benzodiazepine and magnesium, I think.
And did you administer any additional pain medication?
I did.
And
Later.
what did you get?
So after discussing with the pain team, we did start her on a Precedex infusion, which is the dexmedetomidine. Even it's hard for me to say it, so I say Precedex. We started a ketamine infusion with a specific dose of 3 milligrams per kilo per hour. And then we prescribed a benzodiazepine Valium just as a PRN, just as needed basis.
And were there any diagnostic studies that you were attempting to get at that time?
Yeah, and sorry, I forgot to mention, on propofol, we did prescribe that for the evening time so she could sleep.
Okay.
Your question was based on diagnostic studies. The order had already been placed for a abdominal CT scan, but at the time, we still kind of kept that within our plan of what we wanted to achieve. But the family at the time, specifically mom, said that we could not do the study unless she was completely sedated. So we had kind of held on performing the study.
Okay. And was that study eventually performed?
Yes, that was performed. I believe it was Saturday night. So the admission was a Friday afternoon.
So let me clarify that. You saw her on a Friday afternoon. What did your shift? Excuse me, I'm sorry. What did your shift consist of on that Friday?
So my shift on the Friday, usually I end at 5 p.m. is when we do our sign up for the night team. So if you can say she got to our unit about 3 or 4 p.m. So it's towards the end of my shift. My shift consisted of coordinating, getting as much information as we could, coordinating and making sure that the right people were involved in her care, and creating a plan for specifically the most immediate plan, which would be that evening and night, to get her stable during that time.
And when you say you developed a plan, who did you develop it with?
The pain team, which was Dr. Jenny Dolan, and the ICU team. I believe Dr. Dolan spoke with other members of the pain team during that time as well.
And what was the plan at that point?
So the plan was to stabilize Maya and make sure that she wasn't at the level of suffering that we were seeing, and included the medications that I just stated, which are the infusions of ketamine and Precedex, propofol during that first night for a specific amount of time. I believe we said 4 to 6 hours. And then if there's still significant concerns of her abdomen, at some point getting the CT scan.
Okay. During all this discussion with the mother and review of what had gone on, did you receive any information regarding what ketamine or what other drugs the patient had been taking?
Yes. The mom informed me of the medications that she was taking at patient. Not all of them. There was like vitamins and things like that, but mostly the ketamine treatments that she was receiving. She did mention that she was a patient of Dr. Kirkpatrick and Dr. Hannah, and that she would go regularly to get, depending on where her, exacerbation of her pain was, to get these infusions of high doses. She told me all the doses of the ketamine to kind of, in her, kind of explanation was to try to break that pain. She also mentioned that she had been to Mexico for I believe was a week, where they did an infusion of high-dose ketamine, and that she was intubated during the time. And that at this, on our admission, she was asking me to please start those medications, the ketamine at those doses, and that I needed to intubate her. That we had to intubate her and do the whole, kind of a week or whatever, how many days it would require, because that's the only thing that would take her pain away.
During all this exchange, were you given any indication of what the diagnosis of this patient had been at Lurie Children's Hospital?
No, she did mention that she went to Lurie's at some point within the last year to Chicago for a second opinion, and I believe it's in my HMP as I try to summarize everything. But that she went there, she didn't really tell me what the diagnosis was.
Okay. And with respect to Tampa General Hospital, were you told of her being evaluated there or what the diagnosis may have been?
She also said that she went to Tampa General. I don't believe she told me in details. I don't recall that, and it's not in my records.
What were you told regarding what the patient's diagnosis was?
She said that her diagnosis was CRPS, but that it was all in her entire body. Manifestations were in her entire body. And then she also said that she had a history of asthma, for what she went into all the details of prior asthma or coughing visits to the ER, to the pulmonologist, which I then went to the records to, because some of them were in our institution.
Were there, now this was in addition to the abdominal pain that she was
In addition, yes, sorry.
And did you arrive at any let me back up and just ask the question this way. Who was it that was undertaking to manage the patient's pain medications?
During our admission or before? During our admission?
At this point in time?
It was, I seek guidance from the pain team, and they would tell me the plan with the medications. And then my job is making sure like the rest of her organs and everything else is stable. So I would look at their plan from the pain standpoint and just make sure that I was monitoring the right things for the medications that were being utilized.
Did you call for any other consultations besides just the pain team?
That first day?
Yes, ma'am.
Consultations, I don't believe. Oh, yes, we did. I talked to mom about, she expressed a lot of level of stress. And as part of my basic knowledge of chronic pain, we always know that there's a psychological stress that probably needs support with counseling. And so I did offer and told her that we were going to consult our psychiatrist.
Okay. And were there other consultations ordered as well?
Not that. That day, we did not communicate to the family of any other consultations.
And was the psychiatric consultation conducted?
Conducted? No.
Why?
The mom didn't feel like she needed that.
Okay. So when
I believe actually the psychiatrist came. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
But the mom didn't want it.
Okay. So what was the diagnosis upon admission to the PICU as far as you were concerned?
Yes. Let me just refer to my notes for a second. So in the ICU, we have chronic diagnosis and acute diagnosis. The chronic is pretty much relating to the history. So it's complex regional pain syndrome, and the second one is mild persistent asthma. But our acute diagnosis at the time were acute generalized pain exacerbation and abdominal pain. And there is a notation of constipation seen in the X-ray that was obtained for the belly.
Okay. And did you? Let me direct your attention to your note. Mm-hmm. Now, instantly, you wrote what's called a history and physical.
Yes.
Okay. Would you explain to the jury what that is?
So that is basically the initial note that does a summary of the presenting, like the HPI, which is the story of the acute event that brought the patient to the hospital. And then it goes very systematically and organized into all the elements of the history, being process hospitalizations, surgeries, any medications that the patient usually takes, any prior diagnoses, any social exposures, developmental, especially in pediatrics, we like to talk about, where they are developmentally. Then we go into the review of systems. Then we go into any labs that are available that are pertinent to that admission, any imaging studies, and then we go into our assessment, which include our, we call it problem list, like our diagnoses, and then our plan. by systems as well.
Okay, then I'm going to ask that 1001 dash 31 to 38 be put up. And Your Honor, that's in evidence as part of the All Children's Hospital chart, and that begins on the bottom of this page, I believe. And let me ask to scroll over to the, and we're going to publish this along with the Dr. Smith's records in a few moments here, but I'd ask for this to scroll over to the plan portion of this. And I'll ask you, Dr. Beatrice Sanchez, what was the plan for this patient upon the patient's admission?
So the plan was to closely monitor, as we do on all our patients in the ICU, that we had consulted the pain team and we continued communication with them based on the complaints of pain. We created that plan, which is detailed there in number 3 of the medications that we were going to utilize and what doses we were going to start the medication on. And later in that paragraph, we had already discussed that treatment would go over for at least 3 days to make sure that we have her under, a much better control of her pain for those 3 days before considering any type of weaning. We explain all this to the family as well. I do put a notation in there. We like to anticipate in the ICU so that if for some reason she required higher doses and that our team decided to do higher doses, that we express to the family that at that point the risk of respiratory failure or any type of cardiac pathology could arise and that she might need to be intubated. Then I did consult social work. I also consulted psychiatrists, so that's part of the plan. As a multidisciplinary team, we wanted to evaluate all the possible causes of suffering for Maya. And at some point, mom, had kind of agreed, but then once the physician came, she denied it. We will continue to do neurological checks based on her mental status, depending on the doses of the medications. For that night, we did not want to let her eat. We did put her on IV fluids to make sure she was hydrated. And the reason was because we don't ever want to, if we have to intubate a patient, we don't want any food in their belly because they can vomit and then aspirate. And then we did prescribe things like Zofran, which is for nausea. We knew that there was a concern of constipation, so we were just going to closely monitor that for now. We didn't want to give any medications for that because we didn't want to put anything in her belly just in case. I have the abdominal CT still within my plan to be performed at some point to obtain a urine analysis to make sure she wasn't having like a UTI that was causing her the pain. SCDs that basically are like these compression devices on the legs to prevent any type of clots. We do that a lot in our ICU. And I think that's it.
Okay. Now, before formulating that plan, had you gone back and looked at the records of All Children's Hospital for the patient's previous admissions and encounters?
Yes, as much as with the time, that I was there, I did as much as I could to look at notes from before, especially to create this document because I wanted to make sure everything was coherent.
Okay, and in doing that, how many records did you review? It looks like there's several pages here.
Yes, I went through, mostly what I recall is going through like the prior ER visits to our ER. There were notes from consultations and follow-up visits with the pulmonologist as well. Those are the ones that I recall the most.
Okay. Now, was there any issues that you had with Mrs. Kowalski regarding the amount of medication that was being given? Her initial requests were of really high doses. So I don't know if when you mean issues, like more of that discussion that we had, that I was not comfortable given those amount of doses. I had never, I think, gotten anywhere close, and that was
definitely out of my wheelhouse. So I did mention to her that I did not feel comfortable doing that I was consulting with the pain team as the anesthesiologists that deal with this type of kind of chronic pain type of patients. So it was a back and forth on the dosing. Like we would come and create a plan, like we're going to start the ketamine at, I usually start at like 0.5 milligrams per kilo or 1 milligram per kilo, but for different reasons, not specifically for pain. With the pain team, we came up to 3 milligrams per kilo is where we were going to start. The doses that we requested were more like 10 milligrams per kilo. So there was a back and forth on the dosing of what we were going to do.
Was the pain team taking primary responsibility for taking care of the pain medication and
Yes.
pain management? Okay. And what was, did you have any exchange with Mrs. Kowalski about her level of stress and Maya's level of stress at that time?
Yes, I recall during that time when we sat down and kind of were able to have more effective communication. She did express how stressed she had been. I believe I also note that on my HMP, on the HPI part. She was saying that this had been, a really rough year for them, and that she had been very stressed. She did mention that at times she just felt like she just couldn't do it anymore, and that either her and Maya as well were very stressed and thought that, that at times she just wanted to die. She also said, and I put it in quotes, that she just wanted to go to heaven.
Okay. Now, did you offer to assist Mrs. Kowalski about that?
Yes. After that was said, we continue our discussion. I asked her if she had a support system that, that we could definitely consult our psychiatry department for Maya, and that with the social work we can get counseling for her and kind of get her resources at this moment. And she, when I said that, she said, no, well, I'm okay now. I'm not thinking about that right now. So then I told her, I offered, like, if she ever needed, help to try to find resources, or if she needed, if she was having more trouble, that we could help try to find people that could take care of her. But definitely for Maya, that even more reason to get psychiatry involved.
So you couldn't take care of Mrs. Kowalski, but you were offering to do so for Maya.
Yes, but I did offer to get her resources and, kind of names of where to go for her.
Do you have any other recollection of what occurred on this Friday, October 7th, 2016?
No, my recollection is more of personally, I wanted to make sure that there was a consistent plan that we would all follow with all of our team. I usually sign out to the night team about 5 p.m. We start our sign up process is about like an hour because it's about all the patients in the ICU. But that day, because of all the coordination, I actually probably end up leaving the unit or the hospital about 8:30 p.m., which is way past the usual time.
At the time, now you were seeing the Kowalskis the following day, is that right?
Yes, so then I took care of them for Saturday during the day. Usually a day starts at 7:30, and then ends at 5, and Saturday and Sunday. I believe on Sunday, because it's a weekend, sometimes if there's not like a lot of like critical patients or we're not getting a lot of admissions, during the weekend sometimes one of us leaves early. So I believe I left a little bit earlier than 5 on Sunday.
On Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
What about on Saturday? Were there any new developments on Saturday when you took care of it?
Yeah, so during the Saturday, we basically just continued our plan. At that point, I had kind of like the sign up from the night team and some of the more events from the exposure of taking care of Maya from nurses. And after reviewing the all the notes that I had, I had some questions in my mind that were not clear. I had questions about a lot of like the home therapies that Mrs. Kowalski had mentioned that she was doing like IV fluid infusions at home, that she would do them herself, and also IVIG. And so when I went into a lot of...
39.
You may continue, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did there come a point on that Saturday, well, we approach, Your Honor. Sorry.
You may continue, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Your Honor. On Saturday, October 8th, did there come a point in time at which you called Dr. Sally Smith?
Yes.
And did you call Dr. Sally Smith as a consultant?
Yes, I called her to ask her questions.
Okay. Thank you. You had questions, just to answer this question yesterday, you had questions in your mind, so you called her.
Yes.
Okay. Did you continue to see the Kowalskis on that Sunday, October the 9th?
Yes, mainly Saturday and Sunday, it was Dad that was there mostly. I did communicate with Mom over the phone.
Okay. And what, if anything, about the treatment plan changed on Saturday and Sunday?
Not much, to be honest. During the night, we did the propofol only the first night. So the only thing, we continued the ketamine infusion. It had gone up on the dose a little bit by that Saturday, from 3 milligrams per kilo to 5. It's my understanding after reviewing my records. We did not do any more propofol during the nights. And I believe that Saturday night she got the CT scan, which we didn't have the results yet by the time I was there during the morning on Sunday.
So by Sunday, was there a plan made to wean Maya off these medications?
So they were starting the discussions that on Monday we would start the wean process, I believe.
During that weekend, were the pain team continued to see Maya?
The pain team continued to see Maya, yes.
And did they continue to monitor her pain medications and her pain level?
Yes.
Did it appear to you over that weekend that you were able to make Maya comfortable?
Yes. She was not anywhere near the state that she had been on that Friday when she came to us. And then I believe on my note from the Sunday, the 9th, after a sit down with Dad and then Mom was on the phone, Dad did express that she was at a better state that Sunday and at a better control of her pain.
Okay.
And I documented that on my notes for Sunday.
Okay. On Sunday, did it come to your attention that the family wanted to transfer Maya?
No. Up to the time I was in the unit, they did not tell me. Oh, transfer, yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Transfer, yes. They didn't say that they wanted to leave, but yes, transfer.
Did you attempt to facilitate a transfer?
Yes. The process, especially during the weekend, can be a little bit, kind of complicated, but I did call Nemours and started that process to be able to get connected to the physicians that would be able to accept Maya and transfer.
Okay, were you able to reach anybody on that Sunday?
Not just the transfer center from Nemours. I did not personally speak with any of the physicians at Nemours.
So were you able to do anything in terms of facilitating the transfer that weekend?
I just initiated the process, but I personally wasn't able to do anything past that.
Okay. Now, you were on, we talked about October 7th, the Friday, October 8th, the Saturday, October 9th, the Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you hand over to, so to speak?
So that Sunday evening or early nighttime, I contacted Dr. Michelle Smith, who was taking over for that Monday. Okay. And then at whatever time I left the hospital, I signed out to the doctor that was staying.
And who was the pain team that you worked with over that weekend?
Mostly Dr. Jenny Dolan is who I recall with her nurse practitioner. It's who I had my direct interactions that I recall.
Give us what you're on. Two other matters. During the weekend, during this weekend, was the diagnosis CRPS from an outside physician?
Yes.
Okay. And you also had concern about pain all over and abdominal pain, correct?
Yes.
The protocol that was being used for pain control over the weekend, did you and the pain team discuss that with the parents?
Yes, several times.
And did they indicate to you they were in agreement?
Yeah.
After October 9th, did you have any further contact with the Kowalski family?
No.
Were you ever involved in Maya's care after that date?
No.
Thank you.
No questions. Members of the jury, do any of you have? Writing.
Do I need to go?
Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not do the investigation. Receive no information.
All right.
Yeah.
Sanchez, if you can step outside as well. Okay, the jury's out of our presence. Dr. Tepa Sanchez is out of our presence. First question. In your testimony, you mentioned, quote, die, end quote, and, quote, go to heaven, end quote. One, may you please clarify who made these statements? Two, said within the same interview or over different meetings / conversations? Three, are these observations clearly recorded in the J. Hatch medical records? Four, are the records that would document these statements entered in evidence? Four, you testified you communicated with Dr. Sally Smith. What date and time? What documentation of, quote, contact? Was it in an email or medical notation in paper files or verbal with a written follow-up?
You might want to flip it and just double check the question on the back. That's right. That's narrow. That's no problem. It's narrow enough.
Yeah, four is fine.
Any objections from anyone?
The four on the back is fine, and then there's the four up here, which I don't think we can answer.
So all those are okay? Next one, red number 2, Dr. Tepa Sanchez. To a patient, entering the ER can appear confusing when in fact it can be a highly orchestrated flow of events by many staff members to assist in the best care for the patient. 1, how long did Maya spend in the ER before being transferred to the PICU unit? 2, when Maya was transferred to the PICU unit, was the mood of Maya and parents at a more even / calm level, or was there still a flurry of confusion?
No objection.
Yeah, we don't object to the two questions, Judge, to the inquiry.
Anything?
My partner says we agree.
That sounds like I think that's what, 2 agreements today? 3?
Unbelievable.
So I will not ask the introduction. Let's get one. Okay, red number 3. Did you discuss with Dr. Michelle Smith that the family wanted to leave AMA? Why was the family not able to leave AMA? Isn't it protocol to chart in your charting the end of your chart being discussed with family or parents?
No objection.
Red number 4.
if someone tells you they want to go to, quote, heaven, end quote, or, quote, die, end quote, did you report that to anyone to see if she needed to be placed on a psych hold if she is threatening that she wants to die? Could you have not called the police or security if you had concern she was going to harm herself? That's red number 4.
It's okay.
Red number 5. Did the ER Dr. Behar Posey doctor mention to you or the admitting doctor her concerns of possible child abuse that she testified about in her testimony? Do you have that documented of the back and forth of the ketamine dosages of compromising the 1 milligram per kilogram to the 3 milligram kilogram? Will the jury get to see that?
Hang on.
I think the first question is dangerous. It invites a chapter with no response.
I think, yeah, we're gonna have to object to number 1, 2.
I think you're safe on number 1, but I don't want to tell you that.
Number 2 seems okay to me. But number 1 is gonna get us into, it's gonna open up me having to ask questions.
Do we have immunity for this call, Your Honor? Because if we do, I think it obviates the question. If we don't have immunity for this call, it might be something that anyone's...
Well, the first question is the statement by the ER doc to the PICU. And so it's just a question of knowledge. If I
I don't have any problem with it. I don't think we're going to get in trouble with it, but I don't want to be held to that. I think I know what you're going to
Nice. Now you know my problem.
is this something that I could preface it with a yes or no answer?
Sure.
Did the ER
That might be
doctor?
the safest thing to do.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
And otherwise, we're okay?
I guess so.
Red number 6. On October 8th, why did you call Dr. Sally Smith as a consultant and not call the child abuse hotline? Did you not feel you had enough evidence for child abuse? Correct me if I am not correct. You could have just made a call to the child abuse hotline and not call Sally Smith to get started with CPI.
Yikes.
We all know that the reason is that there was a previous call screened out on October 7th. So, again, it's a dangerous question.
She knew that a call had been made. She didn't know the outcome.
Oh, okay. Well, inviting her to speculate what the outcome would also be.
No, she doesn't know.
Yeah.
She'll say she doesn't know.
Okay, so she doesn't know what the status was. I think it's dangerous.
I think Danger Will Robinson is in order here. Not that we're lost in space,
You
but
just dated yourself.
there's a brand new episode about 5 years ago on
I just
Netflix.
told you about that. The robot. Nature, well.
Yeah. What do you watch on Netflix?
Take care of mine.
Actually, I watched Darkest Hour.
No, it's the robot. It's the international sign for flailing.
So I hear there's an objection to this set of questions. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. I think that's
Okay, I'm going to sustain.
probably not a good
Okay,
idea.
so we'll not ask that one. Next question, red number 7. Was Maya dehydrated prior to arrival? Did you identify her nourishment level? Please describe, quote, SCD, end quote, for prevention of blood clotting. Was this from Beata or without Beata's mentions? Your administration of ketamine sounds incremental, moving slowly and methodically up from there. Methodically up from there, period. Identical to Dr. Cantu in his, what is the reason dosing of ketamine is done this way?
Talking about titration. No objection.
Well, other than comment about Dr. Cantu's testimony.
It's fair. She raised it with the Mexico stuff.
It's one juror informing the other jurors what their understanding of the testimony has been.
Yeah, but it derives from the actual note where the Mexico treatment is discussed twice.
It's still editorial comment.
Well, I think the phrase identical to Dr. Cantu in his, I can strike that out, but then leave in the question, what is the reason of dosing of ketamine is done this way? So I will strike that clause and then ask the question. Okay. From a timing perspective, we're at 11:30. Remember, I've got to...
I'll probably 10 minutes for this.
I'm sorry?
Probably get 10 minutes.
Well, okay, so do you want to just take lunch when we finish, Dr.? Bring in the jury, please. Okay, welcome everyone. Please be seated. Members of the jury, I want to confirm while you're away, you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves. You did no investigation and received no information. Is that all correct? And while you were away, you watched all sorts of media accounts about this case. Isn't that correct? And did you talk, or did anyone approach you about this case? Okay. And just to let you know, as you saw Dr. Beatrice Sanchez walking in, I went over these questions outside of her presence with the lawyers. We're going to be able to ask most, but not all of them, but most of the questions we can. Dr. Beatrice Sanchez, in your testimony, you mentioned, quote, die, end quote, and, quote, go to heaven, end quote. May you please clarify who made these statements?
The mother.
Were these statements said within the same interview or over different meetings / conversations?
That was on the first day, on the 7th, when I sat down with her on the couch to get all the history and just kind of try to bond with her.
Are these observations clearly recorded in the Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital medical records?
I'm going to quote my note and read. Mother states that she is extremely tired and is very stressed, and at times feels like she wants to die, unquote. She also expressed that when Maya is in so much pain, she has also expressed she wants to go to heaven, unquote.
The next question, are the records that would document these statements entered into evidence? And the answer to that is yes. The next question, you testified you communicated with Dr. Sally Smith. What date and time?
I communicated with Dr. Sally Smith on the Saturday, I believe was the 8th. And that was, I don't recall exactly the time, but it was probably after my morning rounds, after seeing all the patients.
Okay. What documentation of this contact, was it in an email or medical notation in the paper file, or verbal with a written follow-up?
It was a phone communication.
The next question. How long did Maya spend in the emergency room before being transferred to the PICU?
I honestly don't know.
When Maya was transferred to the PICU, was the mood of Maya and her parents on a more even/calmer level, or was there still a flurry of confusion?
It was, the mood in the room was very chaotic in the PICU. There was a lot of screaming and words that I won't say here, but just very kind of aggressive at some point.
Okay. Now, this next question changes this, Dr. Smith. Did you discuss with Dr. Michelle Smith that the family wanted to leave against medical advice?
No, because up to the time I was there on that Sunday, that was never brought up. The transfer to Nemours was what we were focused on, but I was never told by the family that they wanted to leave the hospital. So I didn't communicate that to Dr. Smith. Michelle.
So the next question, if you know, why was the family not able to leave AMA?
I don't know because I wasn't there.
The next question, isn't it protocol to chart in your charting at the end of your charting discussions with family or parents?
Yes, usually if there's a sit down, we do a little bit more detailed charting, and it's on my note from the 9th, my progress note from the 9th. There is a summary of my discussion that we had. We call it family meetings, where we sat with Mr. Kowalski. Ms. Kowalski was in the meeting over the phone on a conference call type of thing. The pain team was there and all the ICU team. And it's recorded in my note.
If someone tells you they want to go to, quote, heaven, end quote, or, quote, die, end quote, did you report that to anyone to see if she needed to be placed on a psych hold if she is threatening that she wants to die?
So I definitely consulted the psychiatry that we have available at All Children's for Maya. And when I started going into with mom about, a little bit more questions of how she was, she said, right now I'm okay. I have my family. I'm okay. I don't have those thoughts right now. So I said, we have counseling. Please communicate to any of us if you're struggling. So I did. That's what I did.
Could you have not called the police or security if you had a concern she was going to harm herself?
At that point, I would have probably contacted our social worker and kind of asked what the proceedings would be if we had significant concerns on mom, if she needed to be Baker acted, which is what usually we would do. But she was not my patient. She was the mother of my patient. So, my involvement on how to proceed with that, I would have to seek guidance.
Now, this next question, if you can answer with a yes or no answer.
Sure.
Did the emergency room doctor, Dr. Behar Posey, mention to you or the admitting doctor her concerns of possible child abuse that she testified about in her testimony?
No.
Next question. Do you have the document or that documented of the back and forth of the ketamine dosages of comprising the 1 milligram per kilogram to the 3 milligram per kilogram?
I'm going to check my records. From my HPI, I do say she states that at this point she's having a crisis and needs to be placed on an induced medical coma in order to break the pain. And then on my plan, I just state the final doses of what we had agreed on to actually give Maya.
And for the attorneys, these records are in evidence, right?
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay. So there was a next question is, are the jury going to be able to see it? Yes, these are in evidence. Okay. Next question. Was Maya dehydrated prior to arrival?
By the time I saw her, she had already received some therapies in the ER, so I did not appreciate like severe dehydration.
Did you identify Maya's nourishment level?
I did see kind of on my initial impression that she looked very thin. And, you know, we kind of follow the weight. I did consult, I believe, well, it's standard of care. All of our patients get a nutrition evaluation. I honestly don't recall if that was done that day or in the next several days.
Okay. Please describe, quote, SCD, end quote, for preservation of blood clotting. Was this from Beata or without Beata's mentions?
Most of our patients that are a significant size can get this. They're like a pneumatic, almost like socks. They compress your legs to prevent blood clot. So almost all of our patients that are in the ICU, we discuss every day if they need any type of blood clot prevention. These are the least invasive. There are medications that you can get for preventing, but these are the least invasive that are most effective. And some patients actually like them because it's like a massage on their legs, especially for the patients that are immobile and things like high risk, like having a central line or a port. Would put you at a higher risk. So we have our quality list that we go through every patient when we do rounds in the morning. And we go through all of this list to make sure that we discuss this with every patient that we round. And on her, you would see that that was initiated because she was at a higher risk.
Your administration of ketamine sounds incrementally moving slowly and methodically up. What is the reason of dosing of ketamine is done this way?
So initially, like I said, what I'm used to prescribing ketamine are lower doses. So we started at the 3 milligrams per kilo per hour. Overnight, the night team, because of whatever concerns and pain, they actually did go up to 5 milligrams per kilo per hour. So usually we go by how the patient's responding. As we had gone up, make sure the vital signs and everything, all the organs are stable. And I believe that was the highest dose we provided her, at least during the weekend.
Okay. That completes the jury's questions. Mr. Hunter.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Sanchez. Let's start with the last one. You said that you had gone up, that's over the night, they had gone up to 5 milligrams per kilogram per hour. How long was that in place? Do you remember?
The 5?
Yes.
I believe by the time I got there in the morning, that Saturday it was still at 5.
Okay.
And I did not titrate it lower or higher for that Saturday and the Sunday. So the whole continuous time.
Okay. And did you have an understanding about whether they were weaning down after that, from that point?
I have an understanding that after that point, we agreed, and it's on my notes, that would be the max we would do. And then by Monday, it was going to start being weaned.
Why was that the max?
Well, it was at least way above what I was comfortable. We were really concerned about any side effects. And at the time, she seemed to be calmer. So we didn't feel like there was a necessity to go up and get closer to that risk zone if she was calmer.
You mentioned that there was, that there were SCDs, and I can't remember what the acronym means.
Honestly, I can't either.
Something compression. Something.
Compression dressing.
These are basically compression socks?
Yeah, well, yeah, they're mechanical,
Okay.
so they compress.
And tell us why that was necessary or why you did that.
Like I said, you have like a scale that we evaluate for risk, and because she's in bed, not really walking, that's what they do. Our muscles make sure that the vessels are always being squeezed, and she's not walking. She's been in bed, she's sedated, and the fact that she had a central line, all of that adds up into the risk of having clots. So we start that routinely on a lot of our ICU patients.
Is that because of the risk of deep vein thrombosis
Yes.
or pulmonary embolus?
Yes.
Okay.
To prevent.
There was mention made of the exchange you had with Mrs. Kowalski regarding suicide and her feeling. Did you question her about that?
Yes. I asked her, a little bit, like if she can elaborate more, if she was in distress right now, that we could help her. And then she said, no, I've had these thoughts kind of on and off. Right now, I'm okay.
Okay. And did she express to you that she had a support system available?
Yes, she talked a lot about her family and her church, that she had a lot of friends that were, supportive for them.
Okay. Did you have any concerns at that moment in time about her mental well-being?
Not at that moment.
Okay. There was a question asked about the patient, the family's behavior when they came up to pick you.
Yes.
And you mentioned some aggressive speech. What are you talking about?
It was Maya being 10. It just really stuck with me because she would curse, saying the F word, and just kind of towards me or the nurses, screaming. At one point, she actually was spitting. So that was not something that we see in pediatrics.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Anderson?
That must have been pretty amazing to you that a 10-year-old would drop an F-bomb and other things, right?
I mean, it was surprising, yes.
Okay. How come you didn't put down any of the specifics of that in any of your notes?
I don't tend to put curse words in my notes. I do think at some point, I don't recall where, probably in my H&P, I did say that there was aggressive language.
Well, now you're saying that it involves a 10-year-old little girl talking about F-bombs and so forth. You didn't think that was significant enough to describe in your notes?
Can I have a moment to find it? Because might be in my physical exam. Okay. It's after the abdomen on the physical exam. Very difficult to examine as patient refuses to be touched and mother does not want us to evaluate further unless she's placed on anesthesia medication. Then neurologic. She's very agitated. Eyes are open with intact extraocular movements. No focal weakness. The next period. Very aggressive with staff. Not able to evaluate deep reflexes. I think I just kind of summarized it on very aggressive with staff, just because I don't.
But you said nothing
tend to.
about what you testified here in front of this jury, did you?
I just said very aggressive to staff. And to summarize all that, I don't tend to put specific bad language on my notes.
Really?
It's a document, so I
Because
don't.
that's like offensive to you.
It is offensive to me.
Can we? Yes, I'm sorry.
Did you finish your
Did
answer?
you finish your answer about it being offensive to you?
It is offensive to me.
Okay, can we bring up 2175-004?
Is this in evidence?
Yes.
It's in evidence. It's an exchange of texts.
Object beyond scope and relevance, Your Honor. We knew our objection to the relevance of this.
Overruled.
Okay. If we could, you had just found out in this, can you see it there in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. And you just found out that Ketamine Girl's mom committed suicide, right?
Yeah, I believe that was a text that let me know about that
Right.
months later.
And then you say, I know we did the right thing, but this is really F, and then
Yes.
ellipsis, or star, whatever you call it, up. I feel bad.
Yes, I put the little star. It's going to put in really text that.
But isn't it true, you testified, you don't have any remorse for any of this?
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
Yes. Okay, I'm going to sustain the objection. The jury is to disregard the question.
All right, but you seem to be okay with texting the F word.
To a
Is that
friend.
right?
To a friend. I even put the little stars because I don't like to.
Well, and you talked about venous thrombosis. That's a blood clot in the legs?
Yes.
Ah,
Where they usually initiate in the legs. So that's why we target.
And these are like the silent killer that can, in children, break free and travel to the heart?
So actually in children, there's a lot of, kind of studies going on, but there is blood clots do originate in legs, adults or children, but we have had patients that they can break and go to the lungs. The lungs are like sponges, and a lot of the children actually tolerate that, but we still don't want that happening. We try to prevent them.
But they can, if they go to the wrong place, be fatal. Can they not?
They can.
So if Beata Kowalski was concerned about her daughter staying in a laying down, supine, I guess you call it laying down situation, and blood clots going to Maya's heart, that would be medical knowledge you would agree with?
Anybody, including us, would be concerned, yes. And the protocol includes SCDs, we do physical therapy, anything that encourages movement prevents.
And insofar as the amounts of ketamine involved, you have no particular expertise in ketamine, especially at that time, right?
I had expertise, but for different indications. We used it a lot.
How many years were you in practice as of this date, October of 2016?
For critical care. So pediatrics, by then I had probably been off residency for about 4 years.
Off
And
residency?
For pediatrics, yes. And then for critical care, that was a year. but I did 3 years of fellowship.
All right. Nothing further this time.
Anything further, Mr. Hunter?
Very briefly, Ron. The text messages that council showed, were those from your private phone
Yes,
as opposed to the medical record?
yes.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Anderson?
Judge, I'm sorry.
You have another question?
One.
Okay.
Further reference to text messages we talked about. Were those about 3 months after you had last seen this patient?
Yes.
Thank you.
Further, Your Honor.
Any further jury questions? Dr. Sanchez, is it normal between coworkers at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital to discuss patients as nicknames such as ketamine girl or other nicknames?
We don't, if we're doing it over our personal phones, if we have to, or we do, we don't like to put their names. It's an identifier. So we would maybe use a diagnosis or something that would make sure that the other person receiving the text could recall who the patient is without having to go into much detail.
Next question. Did you observe dystonia in Maya's feet?
To be honest with you, I don't recall seeing dystonia. It was a lot of movement of her legs, and maybe there was some inward deviation that I might have kind of described on the physical exam, but it was very hard to do a full physical detail exam. So I can't tell you with certainty if I recall exactly what I saw.
Did you apply SCD?
Yes, I ordered them, and the nurses is actually the ones that apply it.
What date and time?
Let me recall. I'm sure you can go back and see at some point in the records what the orders were, but I believe it was on the 8th.
This sounds excruciating for CRPS. What was Maya's reaction?
I don't recall if they were actually placed, and I didn't recall having a discussion of how that she was feeling with them. It was ordered.
Next question. Did you document Beata's comments of death and going to heaven? You did document Beata's comments of death and going to heaven. Did you also point this out clearly to Dr. Sally Smith during your October 8th, after your rounds phone call to Dr. Sally Smith?
I don't recall talking to Sally Smith about that specific point.
Okay. Are you the one that said, quote, learned today, end quote? If not, do you know now who said it?
On the text messages, I'm assuming?
I believe that's what it's referring to, yes.
No, I didn't. I received that text.
You testified after Maya left your care about October 8th. You had no further contact, but it appears by private text messages you were, quote, keeping up, end quote, on patient Maya. Is that correct?
No. First of all, I took care of her until the 9th. That's a Sunday. And I would have to see the messages because I never took care of her, and I don't think on the messages it says anything of that sort.
Would seeing the messages help?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and put it up, please.
So I'm the one on blue if you guys are seeing it. So I don't say anything there that I saw her again.
Thank you. Mr. Hunter,
Very briefly, Your Honor. About to have the text message up again.
is this going to go more than like a minute?
1 minute.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the text message. The entry learned today is not you, is that correct?
Learned it? No, that's not me.
That came to you. Not,
That came to me.
okay,
I am on blue.
very good. Thank you.
Anything follow-up?
Dr. Tampa, did you say that doctors at Johns Hopkins are not allowed to use the patient's name outside to protect their identities?
We don't like to use our patients, like, at least me.
Well, I think you said doctors, didn't you? Plural?
I don't like
Doctors
to.
there?
I think, I'm trying to use my common practice and say, I can try to generalize, but I don't know what others do. I'm saying the reasons of why.
I'm sorry. Can we bring up 2116001? Do you know Dr. Dees?
I do know Dr. Dees.
And she was
You're going to object to him asking this witness about what other doctors are doing.
Sustained.
I'm not a judge, it's just for the use of the name.
Well, Dr. Beatrice Sanchez isn't a part of this text exchange, right?
No, it was
Okay.
directed towards
So-
all doctors.
Sustained. Anything further from the jury? Okay, seeing none, members of the jury, I hope you have a wonderful lunch. I'm going to ask that they be back at 1:30. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not do any investigation and receive no information. Okay, the jury's out of our presence. We'll be in recess until 1:15. 1:15.
All right, we're in recess.